If you're enjoying this video, smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell. Share it with your friends and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Every like and subscribe helps the channel grow. My name is Michael Nakano. I'm a senior park ranger at Denali National Park in Alaska. What I'm about to tell you happened during the winter of 1995, and even now, I'm not sure if sharing this story is wise. But someone needs to know what's out. There. It started on a Tuesday evening in late November. The sun should have set hours ago, but a strange twilight still hung in the sky. I was out taking measurements of the air and temperature for our winter records when I noticed my watch said 8:37 p.m. But the light outside looked more like 5 p.m. Something wasn't right. I radioed back to the station. "Base, this is Nakano. Is anyone else seeing this weird light outside?" Static crackled before Dr. Samantha Wynn's voice came through. "Affirmative, Michael. The sun's position doesn't match our instruments. I'm recording it now." I looked up at the northern lights dancing across the sky. They weren't their usual flowing waves of color. Tonight, they formed perfect geometric shapes, triangles, hexagons, and patterns that reminded me of something I'd seen in a science textbook. They looked exactly like the diagrams of stress hormones from the human body. This wasn't natural. The snow beneath my boots caught my attention next. The ice crystals weren't forming randomly like they should. They were growing in perfect mathematical patterns. When I looked closer with my flashlight, I could see what looked like a code in the way they lined up, like they were trying to show me coordinates on a map. A bitter wind blew across my face, and that's when I noticed something truly strange. I could feel the biting cold on my skin, like needles piercing my cheeks, but when I checked my body temperature monitor, it showed normal. My mind said I was freezing, but my body wasn't reacting to the cold at all. "Do you hear that?" Sam's voice crackled through the radio again. I stood perfectly still and listened. At first, I heard nothing but the wind. Then underneath it, I caught something else. A deep rumbling sound, almost too low to hear. It wasn't random noise. It had rhythm and pattern like speech, but in no language I recognized. Yet somehow, it reminded me of the old Alaskan native, languages my grandmother used to speak. Back at the monitoring station, our equipment was going crazy. The readings showed quantum energy spikes that matched perfectly with the dates of the great starvation periods that had happened in this region throughout history. Like the land itself remembered the suffering. When I tried to mark my position on the GPS, the numbers kept changing. The mountain peak I was looking at seemed to shift slightly, never quite staying in one place when I measured it. The trees and rocks around me seemed to flicker, as if they couldn't decide exactly where they should be. The wildlife was acting strange too. I watched as a fox suddenly darted away from a spot of empty snow. 3 seconds later, a large chunk of ice fell from a tree branch, exactly where it had been standing, like it knew what was going to happen before it did. As I swept my measuring equipment across the landscape, the magnetic readings formed shapes that looked exactly like the parts of the human brain that light up when people are starving. It was as if the land itself was hungry. That's when it happened, the moment that still haunts my dreams. For just a split second, I didn't see just one version of the forest around me. I saw many versions, all layered on top of each other, like looking through a stack of slightly different photographs all at once. In one version, the trees were taller. In another, the snow was deeper. In a third, there was a figure standing among the trees that wasn't there in the others, a tall, thin figure watching me. When my vision cleared, everything snapped back to normal. But I knew what I'd seen wasn't a hallucination. Something was very wrong with reality in Denali that winter, and whatever it was just beginning. I keyed my radio with shaking fingers. "Sam, I'm coming back to base. There's something out here, something, I don't know how to explain it. The radio answered with nothing but static. And when I looked back toward the forest, I saw the northern lights pulsing in perfect time with a human heartbeat. Maybe I should tell you more about myself before I continue. My name is Michael Nakano, and according to official records, I'm dead. That sounds crazy, I know. But in 1991, I was part of a research team at an Arctic station just north of here. A massive storm hit, communications went down, and by the time rescue arrived, they found everyone frozen. The report listed all 8 researchers as deceased, including me. But here I am. I've never been able to explain how I survived, and after a while I stopped trying. The government gave me a new identity, and I came to work at Denali. Most people don't ask questions when you're good at your job, and I'm very good at mine. Sleep hasn't been normal for me since that incident. When I close my eyes, I start dreaming before I'm actually asleep. Doctors say that's impossible. REM sleep is supposed to come after you've been asleep for a while, but my brain jumps right to dreaming while I'm still aware of everything around me. My mother was Inuit, and she taught me about the old ways. Our people believed the weather had spirits that could be communicated with through special ceremonies. I keep journals where I've written down everything she taught me, but I use a code system so others won't find it. Science doesn't like to mix with spiritual traditions. There's something else strange about me. During my physicals, doctors are always shocked when they take my temperature. It reads well below what should be fatal hypothermia, but I feel fine. They blame it on faulty equipment, but we both know that's not the case. I've been mentoring Dr. Samantha Wynn for about a year now. She's brilliant, a glaciologist studying climate patterns, but something odd happens whenever we work together. Her data shows anomalies that can't be explained, numbers that don't add up, readings that shouldn't be possible. Your ice samples are impossible, Mike, she told me once while looking through her microscope. These isotope ratios suggest this ice is simultaneously 10,000 years old and formed last week. Scientists value my work because my weather predictions are never wrong. I just know things, like I can taste a storm coming days before it hits. They call it intuition. I call it something else. The cold does things to my memory. When the temperature drops to certain levels, I suddenly remember things from years ago with perfect clarity. Things I didn't even know I had noticed at the time. My research combines science with the old knowledge from my mother's people. I've developed weather models that the scientific community laughs at, but can't argue with when they predict patterns that traditional models miss. They call it coincidence. I call it listening to what the land is trying to tell us. After seeing those northern lights and the shifting landscape, I made it back to our research station where Sam was waiting, her face pale in the light of our monitors. Mike, what's happening out there? The readings are... I know, I said, brushing snow from my jacket. Something's wrong with reality here. That's not scientific, she said, but her voice trembled. Neither is a man walking away from a frozen research station where everyone, including him, was reported dead. I started pulling up the data we'd collected. Look at these weather patterns. They're forming shapes like human organs. That's not random. Sam's eyes widened as she looked at the screen. The storm system. It looks exactly like a human digestive tract. Whatever's happening, it started 3 days ago when we took those ice core samples from the North Ridge, I said. We need to go back there tomorrow. In this weather, you said a storm is coming. I looked out the window at the too bright twilight that shouldn't exist at this time of night. I don't think that's our biggest problem right now. That night I dreamed while wide awake. In my dream, I saw Sam and me walking across the snow towards something waiting in the trees. Something tall and thin that was somehow in many places at once. Something hungry. When I snapped out of it, I found myself standing in the lab with one of our ice samples in my hand. I didn't remember getting up. The ice was melting against my palm, but my skin felt freezing cold. Whatever was happening. In Denali National Park, it knew we were here, and it was watching us. The next morning, Sam and I headed out to the North Ridge, where we'd taken the ice samples. The strange twilight was still there, even though the sun should have been up by now. Everything looked not quite right, like when you have a fever and the world seems slightly off. "I've never seen ice like this," Sam said as we approached the sample site. She knelt down and shined her light on a formation that hadn't been there yesterday. Inside, the clear ice was what looked like a frozen piece of meat, but something was wrong with it. When I moved my head slightly, it seemed to change. Sometimes looking frozen solid, sometimes looking fresh and unfrozen, depending on the angle I viewed it from. "That's impossible," I whispered. "Something can't be frozen and unfrozen at the same time." Sam took out a sample container. "And yet here it is. Let's get it back to the lab." As she chipped away at the ice, I took air samples. The readings made no sense. The particles in the air had no match to anything in our database. They weren't from Earth, at least not the Earth we knew. A few feet away, I spotted something dark in the ice. Carefully, I chipped it out and held it up. "Sam, look at this." It was a hunting tool, something like a spear point made of bone. Nothing unusual for Alaska, except when Sam dated it with our portable equipment, it showed something impossible. "This can't be right," she said, frowning at the device. "According to this, the tool was made 8,000 years ago. But that's the same dating as the one we found yesterday that was made in a completely different style. How can two tools from completely different time periods be made the same way?" I asked. "They can't be," she replied. Unless time isn't working properly here," I finished. We continued our survey, finding more strange things. Crystal formations that shouldn't exist naturally, giving off weird radiation that made us feel hungry when we stood near them. Our equipment showed time passing differently depending on where we placed it. One clock running 5 minutes faster than another just 10 feet away. The wind picked up and we both froze when we heard it. Voices in the wind, not imagination. Actual words in an old Inuit language, saying the same thing over and over. "The hungry one comes when the lights dance." I looked up at the sky where the northern lights were still visible, even in daytime. They were forming new shapes now, perfect outlines of a human stomach, intestines, a throat. Sam gasped beside me. "Mike, look at this ice core." The sample she'd just pulled had strange organic material arranged in patterns that looked like DNA, but unlike any I'd ever seen. Almost like a blueprint for a human body changed to survive extreme starvation. As we worked, I noticed something else disturbing. The temperature around us wasn't consistent. There would be spots of extreme cold right next to normal areas, and when I mapped them out, they formed a pattern. Each cold spot matched exactly with the location of historical incidents, where people had been forced to eat each other to survive, like the land remembered. "Our markers are gone," Sam said suddenly, looking around in confusion. The survey markers we'd placed yesterday had vanished. As we searched for them, they reappeared, but not where we'd left them. They formed a new pattern across the snow, pointing to specific locations. When I checked my future weather models against these points, my blood ran cold. Each marker now sat at a spot where, according to my predictions, people would face starvation events in the coming years. "Sam," I said quietly, "I think something is trying to show us a pattern, something that feeds on human hunger." "That's crazy," she said, but her voice shook. "Hunger isn't something that can be fed on, isn't it?" I pointed to the northern lights, still pulsing in rhythm like a digestive system. What if something evolved to do exactly that? As I spoke, a shadow moved between the trees ahead of us. Not a normal shadow. This one seemed to exist in multiple places at once, like several slightly different versions of the same tall, thin figure all overlapping. "Sam," I whispered, "don't move." The temperature plummeted around us. My breath came out in clouds, but I still didn't feel cold. Just a growing, gnawing emptiness in my stomach that hadn't been there a moment ago. "Mike," Sam whispered, her eyes wide with fear, "I can see through it, and I think it can see us too." The shadow between the trees shifted, and for just a moment it looked exactly like a human figure stretched too thin, with too many limbs in too many places at once. And then it was gone, leaving behind only our pounding hearts and the soft sound of our survey markers falling one by one into the snow, forming a circle around us. We ran back to the research station as fast as we could, the survey markers still clutched in our hands. Neither of us spoke about what we'd seen in the trees. What could we say? How do you talk about something that exists in multiple places at once? Inside the station, we secured the door and spread our samples on the lab table. The piece of meat-like substance in the ice was still doing that impossible thing, frozen and unfrozen, depending on how you looked at it. "Mike," Sam said, her voice quiet, "do you remember the old Inuit stories your mother told you? Was there ever anything about a spirit that feeds on hunger?" I thought back to my childhood, to the stories my grandmother would tell around the fire. There were tales of the Wendigo, a spirit that possessed people who had committed cannibalism. It would turn them into monsters that were always hungry, never satisfied. "But this isn't like those stories," Sam said, looking at our readings. "This is something different." That's when it happened. The lights flickered, and for a moment, I wasn't just seeing through my own eyes. I was seeing the room from multiple perspectives at once. From my position, from Sam's, and from something else that seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at the same time. Something that saw us as food. "It's here," I whispered. The temperature in the room dropped suddenly, not everywhere, just in patterns that moved across the floor like footsteps. Where the cold touched, frost formed in shapes that looked like words, symbols I almost recognized from my mother's language. "It's trying to talk to us," I said, watching the frost patterns spread. "How is that possible?" Sam asked, backing away from the moving cold spots. "I don't know, but I can almost understand it." The cold seemed to bypass my skin and speak directly to my brain. I could feel words forming in my mind that weren't my own. "It's been here for thousands of years," I told Sam, translating what I somehow understood. "It doesn't exist like we do. It's like a shadow of hunger itself, made real by quantum physics." "That's impossible," Sam whispered, but she didn't sound convinced. As we watched, the shadow from the forest began to form in the corner of the room. Not solid, more like a dark spot where probability itself was breaking down. It stayed in one place, but also seemed to be in slightly different positions all at once, like a smeared photograph. "What does it want?" Sam asked, her voice shaking. The answer came to me through the cold. "It feeds on the energy of starving humans, not their bodies, their suffering." The shadow grew taller, stretching toward the ceiling. As it did, I could see it more clearly. It had a human shape, but too thin, with limbs that bent at impossible angles and fingers like icicles. Its face was both there and not there, like it couldn't quite decide what to look like. "Mike, look at the readings." Sam pointed to our equipment. The energy fields around the entity were visible on our screens, waves of probability collapsing into patterns I recognized from quantum physics classes. It wasn't fully in our reality. It existed in multiple possible worlds at once, and was somehow bridging between them. Then it made a sound, not with a mouth, but by vibrating the air molecules around us. The sound formed words in that ancient language I'd heard in the wind. "The hunger time comes again." Sam gasped and grabbed her arm. "Mike, I feel strange." I turned to look at her and froze in shock. Sam's body temperature readout on our monitoring equipment was fluctuating wildly. 1 second normal, the next absolute zero, then back again. But she wasn't dying. She wasn't even shivering. "Mike," she whispered, looking at her hands, "I can see everything." all the possible versions of this room at once. The entity was doing something to her, changing her somehow. As I watched, Sam seemed to flicker slightly, like she was moving between different versions of herself. "It's integrating with you," I said, the knowledge coming from somewhere beyond my understanding. "It's trying to use you as an anchor in our reality." The entity moved closer to Sam, reaching out with those two long fingers. Where they passed, reality itself seemed to bend and warp like heat waves above hot pavement. I had to do something. Drawing on everything my mother had taught me, I began to recite an old Inuit binding ritual, words meant to trap spirits that had crossed into our world. The entity turned toward me, and suddenly I felt a hunger unlike anything I'd ever experienced, a bottomless emptiness that could never be filled. It was attacking me with its essence. Outside, the northern lights flared brighter than ever, shining through the windows in pulsing waves that matched the rhythm of my racing heart. "Mike," Sam said, her voice changing, becoming both hers and not hers at the same time. "It's showing me things. This entity, it's not evil, it's just hungry, and it's been waiting for so long." The room around us began to shift and change, reality becoming fluid as the entity's influence grew stronger. I could see multiple versions of our research station overlapping, one where the equipment was arranged differently, one where ice had broken through the walls, one where Sam and I had never arrived at all. The quantum Wendigo was tearing apart, the fabric of reality itself, and we were running out of time to stop it. "Sam!" I shouted, trying to reach her through whatever connection she was forming with the entity. "You have to fight it." But Sam was changing before my eyes. Her body seemed to flicker, aging and growing younger in visible waves, like she was experiencing all possible versions of herself at once. "It's not what you think, Mike," she said, her voice echoing strangely. "It's ancient. It crashed here thousands of years ago." "What are you talking about?" I asked, still feeling that terrible hunger gnawing at me. "It's showing me," Sam said, her eyes reflecting the northern lights, even though she was facing away from the windows. "There's a crash site under the ice, something not from Earth. That's what's causing all this." Suddenly I understood. The quantum Wendigo wasn't a traditional spirit, it was something else. Something that used quantum physics to exist across multiple realities. And it had been using the patterns of human hunger and suffering as a template to form itself. I needed a plan. The binding ritual wasn't working because this wasn't a normal spirit. I needed something that would work across multiple realities at once. "Sam, can you still hear me?" I asked, watching as her form became less and less solid. "Yes," she answered, her voice coming from several places in the room at once. "I need you to help me find the crash site. If that's what's anchoring this thing to our reality, maybe we can use it to trap the entity." The northern lights flashed brighter, and suddenly the walls of our research station seemed to disappear. I could see the landscape outside, but not just one version, dozens of overlapping versions. In some, the trees were taller. In others, the mountains had different shapes. But in all of them, one spot remained constant, a depression in the ground about a mile north of our position. "There," Sam pointed with a hand that seemed to leave trails in the air. "That's where it first came through." I grabbed my pack, stuffing it with equipment I might need. "We have to go there now." "I'll show you the way," Sam said, but she didn't sound entirely like herself anymore. The entity was taking her over, using her as a bridge between its reality and ours. We stepped outside into a world gone mad. The northern lights had taken over the entire sky, pulsing with organic rhythms. The landscape flickered between versions of itself like a badly tuned TV, and everywhere I looked, I could see thin, stretched shadows moving just at the edge of vision. Sam moved with unnatural speed, sometimes seeming to be in two places at once, as she led me toward the crash site. I stumbled after her, fighting the growing hunger that threatened to overwhelm me. When we reached the depression, I could see it wasn't natural. Despite being covered with thousands of years of ice and snow, The perfect circular shape was still visible, and at its center something gleamed with an impossible light. "That's it," Sam said, her voice now barely recognizable. "That's what anchors it to this reality." The object was small, about the size of my fist, with a crystalline structure that seemed to shift and change as I looked at it. It gave off a cold light and radiated a hunger that pulled at my very being. The entity was all around us now, its thin form visible as distortions in the air. It reached for the object with too many arms from too many directions all at once. "It needs to feed," Sam said, her body now almost transparent. "It's been starving for thousands of years." I realized then what was happening. This thing, whatever it was, had crashed here long ago. It existed across multiple quantum realities and had been trapped, unable to fully materialize in any one reality. It had been trying to build itself a body using the template of human hunger, the most primal force it could find in our minds, and now it was using Sam to finish the job. I made my decision. Drawing on everything my grandmother had taught me, I began a different kind of ritual, not to bind the entity, but to communicate with it. I let myself feel the hunger it was projecting, accepted it into myself, experienced starvation across all possible realities at once. The pain was unbearable, but through it, I could finally understand. "You don't belong here," I told the entity. "This reality is killing you. That's why you need to feed on our hunger to survive." The air shimmered as the entity seemed to respond, the terrible hunger easing slightly. "I can help you," I continued, "but you have to let Sam go." The northern lights pulsed brighter, and Sam fell to her knees. Her body solidified somewhat, becoming more present in our reality, though I could still see the changes washing over her, her form fluid and unstable. I picked up the crystalline object from the crash site. It burned with cold in my hands, but I held tight. My plan was desperate and possibly suicidal, but it was all I had. "You exist across multiple quantum realities," I said to the entity. "But you can't fully exist in any of them. You need an anchor, something that can exist in all possible worlds at once." I held up the crystal. "This isn't enough anymore, it's degrading, but I can be your new anchor." Sam looked up at me, her eyes changing color rapidly. "Mike, no, it will consume you. Not if I control." "The terms," I said. I began the final part of the ritual, offering myself as a quantum boundary entity, something that could exist partially in multiple realities and serve as a bridge between them. The air around me tore open as the northern lights descended to the ground. The entity, now fully visible as a network of probability shadows forming a vaguely human shape, approached me. For a moment, everything stopped. I could see all possible versions of this moment happening simultaneously. Ones where I failed, ones where I succeeded, ones where I had never come to Alaska at all. Then I plunged the crystal into my own chest. The pain was beyond description, but with it came understanding. I could feel the entity's consciousness fragmenting across realities, being bound not to one world, but to the boundaries between them. And I was becoming those boundaries. The northern lights flared one last time, then faded to normal. The landscape stopped shifting and settled into a single reality again. Sam collapsed to the ground, her body returning to normal. I stood there, the crystal somehow merged with my chest, feeling different than I ever had before. I could still see faint shadows of other realities around the edges of my vision, but the entity was contained, probability-bound rather than destroyed. Its consciousness fragmented across separate quantum realities with me as the anchor keeping it from fully manifesting in any one of them. "Mike!" Sam looked up at me, her voice her own again. "What happened? What did you do?" I helped her to her feet. "I made a deal. It exists through me now, but can't fully enter our world. Are you still you?" she asked, studying my face. Mostly, I answered truthfully. But I can see things now, probabilities, possible futures, and I always will. We walked back to the research station in silence. The Wendigo was gone, but not destroyed. It would always be with me now, part of me, as I was part of it. A guardian at the boundary between realities. That was 30 years ago. I still work as a ranger at Denali, watching for signs of other thin places in reality. The hunger never completely goes away, but I've learned to live with it. And sometimes, when the northern lights are particularly strong, I can see all possible versions of the park at once and the thin shadows that move between them. The quantum Wendigo sleeps, fragments of its consciousness scattered across realities. But it's still out there, waiting in the spaces between possibilities. And I'm the only thing keeping it from finding its way back. So if you ever visit Denali National Park and see a ranger who seems to be in slightly different places at once, or who knows a storm is coming before anyone else, just nod and move on. Some boundaries aren't meant to be crossed twice. My name is Catherine Hayes. I'm 39 years old, and I work as a park ranger in Olympic National Forest in Washington. Most people think I'm just good at my job, but the truth is, this forest and I share a secret that no science book can explain. When I was 8 years old, I got lost in these same woods. 3 days, they searched for me. When they found me, I was healthy but different. I told them I ate some mushrooms to survive, but I never told anyone how those mushrooms spoke to me, or how the trees seemed to bend to show me paths, or how the moss glowed at night to keep me company. The doctor said I was lucky. The lummy grandmother who visited me in the hospital said I was mycelium touched. That means the underground network of fungus that connects all the trees had welcomed me. She taught me to identify mushrooms, not just by their caps and stems, but by the feeling they give off when you're near them. I have dreams where I can feel the forest thinking. Sometimes I wake up knowing a tree has fallen or a new patch of chanterelles has sprouted near Copper Creek. When I check, I'm always right. My blood tests confuse doctors. There are plant compounds in my cells that shouldn't be there. I don't get sick like other people. The scientific community thinks I'm a bit weird, but they can't argue with my results. I find fungal species no one else can locate. I feel their frequencies is how I explain it. Scientists don't like that explanation. This spring, I was assigned to supervise a graduate student named William Chen. He's brilliant, but skeptical. His research papers on fungal communication keep describing my discoveries without naming me. I didn't mind. I knew the forest would show him the truth eventually. The morning everything changed started with strange fog. It hung in the air in perfect layers, like a cake. Each layer had different amounts of oxygen. The moss on fallen logs was growing in perfect mathematical patterns. When I showed William, he took photos but didn't seem worried. Fascinating natural phenomenon, he said. But I knew better. I'd been cutting open fallen trees, studying their growth rings. Some sections had aged decades within a single season. Something was happening to time in this part of the forest. And sometimes, standing in patches of sunlight, my skin would tingle and turn slightly green, like it was trying to photosynthesize. Just for a few seconds, but enough to know that whatever happened to me as a child was growing stronger. Our equipment picked up electrical signals moving through the mycelium networks underground. They looked exactly like simplified brain patterns. When we brought harvesting tools, paths would literally disappear, forcing us to turn around. Animals were acting strange too. Deer, rabbits, and birds moved together like they were all parts of one big creature. The air pressure would change based on how I was feeling, creating little weather systems that matched my moods. Sometimes, just for a blink, I'd see a tree, as it was in the past, present, and future all at once. I didn't tell William about that part. He already thought I was odd. I kept my massive collection of spore samples secret from him too, each one labeled both with scientific names and what. The Lummi people called them, each one a key to memories the forest had shared with me. I knew we were about to discover something big. I just didn't know it would change everything about what we think is human, what we think is nature, and what lives in between. The forest was calling us deeper, and for the first time in my life, I was afraid of what it wanted to show me. William and I set up our research camp in a clearing surrounded by ancient cedar trees. Their trunks were wider than my car, and they creaked and groaned in the wind like they were talking to each other. "I think we should map the mycelium networks first," William said, unpacking his special soil testing equipment. "My professor says this area has some of the oldest fungal systems in North America." I nodded but wasn't really listening. I was staring at a perfect circle of trees, growing in a geometric pattern that shouldn't exist in nature. Each tree was exactly the same distance from the others, like someone had used a giant ruler to plant them. "William, come look at this," I called. He walked over, his boots crunching on fallen leaves. His eyes widened when he saw the trees. "That's unusual," he said, taking out his camera. "Could be caused by nutrient distribution in the soil." But I knew better. I'd been watching this forest for years, and these trees weren't here last month. They had grown faster than any tree should be able to grow. We took soil samples from the circle. Under the microscope back at camp, the mycelium looked wrong. Instead of spreading out randomly like normal fungus, it formed patterns that looked like brain tissue. And our equipment picked up tiny electrical signals pulsing through it, like it was thinking. "This reminds me of something I read about slime. Old solving mazes," William said, his voice excited. "But this is much more complex." That night I couldn't sleep. The forest sounds were different. Usually you hear random cricket chirps and occasional owl hoots. But that night everything seemed to follow a pattern, like music. When I recorded it and looked at the sound waves on my computer, they looked like speech patterns. The next morning, we found all our survey markers moved. Someone or something had arranged them in patterns that looked like the pictographs I'd seen in Lummi tribal books. Symbols no scientist had ever properly documented. "Maybe someone's messing with us," William suggested. "Local kids playing. Pranks!" I shook my head. "There are no roads nearby. We're miles from any trail." As we hiked deeper into the forest that day, I noticed the plants were watching us. Not in a spooky way at first, just ferns that turned slightly as we passed, moss that seemed to brighten when I touched it. We found a patch of mushrooms I'd never seen before. They were pale blue with red speckles. When William bent down to take a sample, I felt dizzy suddenly, like I was falling into a memory that wasn't mine. I saw the forest as it was 100 years ago, different trees, different paths. I saw native people gathering plants. I saw animals that don't live here anymore. When I blinked, it was gone. But William was staring at me strangely. "You okay?" he asked. "You zoned out for a minute there." "I'm fine," I lied. "Just tired." That night, I woke up to find plants had grown around my tent in a perfect circle. Ferns, wildflowers, even small. Saplings that couldn't possibly have sprouted overnight. They formed a protective barrier. When I stepped outside, they slowly returned to normal positions, like they were embarrassed to be caught. William's equipment kept malfunctioning. Batteries drained too quickly. Compass needles spun in circles. Our GPS showed us in impossible locations, sometimes in the ocean, sometimes on mountaintops miles away. "There's something electromagnetic going on here," he insisted. "Maybe mineral deposits affecting our gear, but when we checked our original research markers days later, they had moved again. This time, when I plotted their locations on a map, they matched exactly with historical Bigfoot sighting locations from the 1970s. I didn't tell William that part. Instead, I suggested we try a new research area tomorrow. "There's a valley about 2 miles west that might have better samples," I said, hoping to lead us away from whatever was happening. He agreed, But that night, as I looked at our maps by flashlight, I realized something that made my skin go cold. Every path we had taken so far formed a spiral leading to one specific spot in the forest, a place I'd avoided since I was a child, the place where I got lost all those years ago. The forest wasn't just communicating anymore, it was guiding us. The hike toward the valley took longer than it should have. Paths that were straight on our maps kept curving, leading us in circles. By midday, we ended up right back where we didn't want to be, near the spot where I'd been lost as a child. "This doesn't make sense," William said, checking his compass for the 10th time. "We've been heading west all morning." I felt a tingling up my spine. The trees here were different, taller, older, their trunks twisted in ways that almost looked like faces when you glimpsed them from the corner of your eye. "Let's stop for lunch," I suggested, trying to keep my voice steady. As we ate our sandwiches, I noticed the moss growing in patterns across fallen logs. Not random splotches like normal moss, but perfect spirals and branching shapes like river systems seen from above. Some of the patterns looked like words in a language I couldn't quite remember. "William, does that moss look weird to you?" I asked. He leaned closer to look. "Fascinating growth pattern. Could be responding to moisture distribution." But while he took photos, I saw something he didn't. For just a second, the moss glowed with a faint blue light, pulsing in a rhythm like a heartbeat. After lunch, we took soil samples. The dirt felt wrong in my hands, too warm, almost like touching skin. When William checked the samples under his portable microscope, he gasped. "Catherine, come see this!" The mycelium networks in the soil were forming structures that looked like neural networks, like simplified brain cells, and they were active, sending electrical signals to each other. "This shouldn't be possible," he whispered. "Fungi don't have neurons, but these did. And worse, when I looked at them, I felt like they were looking back at me." That afternoon, the forest sounds changed again. Birds stopped singing all at once. The wind died completely. In the silence, we heard something moving through the undergrowth. Something big that somehow made no sound when it stepped on fallen branches. William didn't notice. He was too busy with his soil samples. I kept seeing movement at the edge of my vision, tall, dark shapes moving between trees. When I turned to look directly, nothing was there. But the feeling of being watched grew stronger. "I think we should head back to camp before dark," I said. As we walked, William kept stopping to cough. At first I thought he was just tired. But then I noticed tiny spots on his hands, little patches of skin that looked slightly green in the sunlight. "Are you feeling okay?" I asked. "Just allergies," he said. "Probably spores in the air." That night at camp, our recording equipment picked up strange sounds, rhythmic thumping that matched exactly with the sound of a heartbeat, but it seemed to come from the trees themselves, sap moving in time like blood pumping. William's cough got worse. He took off his shirt to check for a rash, and I saw small paw-like openings on his back. They weren't bleeding or infected. They looked more like the breathing pores you might see on a mushroom cap. "What's happening to me?" he asked, his voice shaking for the first time. I didn't have an answer. But that night, I dreamed of the forest speaking to me in voices made of rustling leaves. It showed me William's body filled with thin white threads of mycelium, spreading through him like roots through soil. I woke up to find the plants had arranged themselves around my tent again, but differently this time. They formed a path leading deeper into the forest, toward the place I'd been lost as a child. In the morning, William seemed better, but different. His eyes looked clearer, almost too bright. He moved more smoothly, and he didn't need his glasses anymore. "I had the strangest dreams," he said. "I could feel everything in the forest at once, every tree, every insect. It was beautiful." Our equipment was going crazy. Readings showed Massive surges of electrical activity moving through the ground beneath us, pulsing outward like ripples in a pond. And each pulse seemed to center around William. We found tree formations growing in perfect geometric patterns covering huge areas. Some trees had grown several feet overnight, growth rates that should be impossible. "This is groundbreaking research," William said, his voice eerily calm. "We're witnessing something revolutionary." But I wasn't excited anymore. I was scared. Because that morning, when William thought I wasn't looking, I saw him press his hand against a tree trunk. And I saw thin white threads extend from his fingertips into the bark, connecting him to the tree like he was plugging himself in. Something was transforming William, and the forest was calling me too, pulling me toward that spot from my childhood, the heart of whatever was happening here. That night, I made a decision. I wrote everything down in my journal just in case. Then I slipped a note into our emergency satellite phone case, which William never used. If something happened to me, at least someone would know. Tomorrow we would go to the place where it all began, the place where the forest first spoke to me. Morning came with a thick fog that hung between the trees in perfect layers. The forest was silent. No birds, no insects, not even wind. Just our breathing and the soft crunch of leaves under our boots. "We need to go there," I said, pointing toward a valley hidden behind a ridge of moss-covered rocks. "That's where I was lost as a child." William nodded, his eyes too bright, his skin slightly green in patches. The small pores on his neck and hands had grown overnight. He didn't seem bothered by them anymore. "I can feel it calling us," he said quietly. "It wants to show us something." As we hiked, the trees seemed to move aside, creating a path for us. Ferns bent away from our feet. Branches lifted to let us pass. The forest wasn't just alive, it was watching, waiting, guiding. Around midday, our equipment went completely dead. Batteries drained, screens blank. Even our backup solar chargers wouldn't work. We were alone with the forest, no way to call for help. The fog grew thicker as we entered the valley. It swirled around us in shapes that almost looked like hands, reaching out to touch our faces. The air felt heavy, like breathing underwater. "Look," William whispered, pointing ahead. Through gaps in the fog, I saw something moving between the trees. Not an animal. It was too tall, too strange. It looked like a person made of twisted roots and fungus, with a head shaped like a mushroom cap. It moved smoothly, flowing rather than walking. "What is that?" William asked, but he didn't sound scared. He sounded excited. The thing disappeared into the mist. When we reached the spot where it had been, we found a circle of mushrooms, a fairy ring, with strange symbols drawn in the dirt. The symbols matched those from my childhood dreams. I knelt to touch one of the mushrooms. Instantly, my mind filled with images. The forest growing over centuries, trees rising and falling, animals evolving, and something watching it all, learning, growing under the ground. When I looked up, William was gone. "William?" I called, trying to keep my voice steady. I found him 30 feet away, standing perfectly still, with his hands pressed against a massive tree trunk. His eyes were closed, and his breathing had slowed to almost nothing. Thin white threads, like fungal roots, extended from his fingertips into the bark, pulsing with light. "William!" I shouted, grabbing his shoulder. He opened his eyes slowly. They weren't brown anymore. They were green with white specks like spores. "Catherine," he said, his voice different, deeper, with a strange echo. "It's beautiful. It's all connected, everything, everyone, for miles and miles. What's happening to you?" I asked, fighting back tears. "Evolution," he smiled. "Adaptation. The network needs a voice, a body. I understand now." Before I could respond, a sound echoed through the valley, not quite animal, not quite human. A low humming call that made the ground vibrate under our feet. William turned toward it like he was being pulled by a magnet. "We need to go there," he said, pointing toward a dark part of the forest where the trees grew too close together, where no sunlight reached the ground. I wanted to run, to go back to camp, grab the satellite phone, call for help. But I knew the forest wouldn't let me leave, and I couldn't leave William. As we walked deeper into the darkness, the air became warm and moist like being inside a greenhouse. The ground squished under our feet, covered in thick carpets of moss and mushrooms that glowed with faint blue light. And then we saw them, shapes moving in the darkness. Tall, humanoid figures made of densely packed mycelium, glowing faintly from within. They moved between trees, connected to the ground by thick cords of fungal matter that pulsed with light. Through my infrared camera, the only piece of equipment still working, they looked almost human in shape, but wrong. Too tall, too fluid in their movements, like people made of living, thinking fungus, the entity, William whispered. The forest mind. One of the figures approached us. It had no face, just a smooth area where a face should be. But somehow I knew it was looking at me. When it reached out, I couldn't move. Not from fear, but because my consciousness was suddenly everywhere. I could feel every tree, every patch of moss, every mushroom for miles. I was spread thin across the entire forest, my thoughts mixing with something ancient and patient, and very, very alive. It was speaking to me through chemicals in the air, compounds that triggered memories and emotions when I breathed them in. Not words, but pure meaning flowing directly into my mind. It knew me. It remembered me from when I was a child. It had been waiting for me to return. When I came back to my body, I was on my knees, gasping for air. William stood beside the entity, his skin now clearly showing patches of green and white, small mushrooms beginning to grow from his shoulders. They've been here for thousands of years, he said, his voice no longer sounding fully human. Living under the forest, thinking, growing, evolving, using the network to become something new, something wonderful. The entity reached for me again, but this time I stepped back. What do you want from us? I asked. William answered, but his voice blended with sounds from the trees and ground. Not from us, he said. With us. It wants to connect, to share, to grow together. As he spoke, more of the entities emerged from the darkness, surrounding us in a circle of glowing, pulsing fungal bodies. And in the center of their circle was a depression in the ground, a path leading down into the earth, into the heart of the network. The path into the earth was lined with glowing mushrooms that pulsed like heartbeats. Each step we took downward made the air warmer and the light stranger. Not darkness, but a soft blue-green glow that came from everywhere and nowhere. William moved like he knew exactly where to go. His transformation was getting worse or better, depending on how you looked at it. The small mushrooms on his shoulders had grown larger. The skin on his hands was becoming transparent in patches, showing white threads underneath instead of blood vessels. It's not dangerous, he said, noticing my stare. It feels right. Like this is what I was always supposed to become. The tunnel opened into a massive underground chamber. The ceiling was held up by giant tree roots that grew down from the forest above. The floor was a thick carpet of mycelium, white, thread-like fungus that glowed and pulsed with light, and in the center was something I'll never forget. It looked like a giant human skeleton, at least 8 feet tall. But it wasn't just bones. The skeleton was completely covered in and filled with glowing fungal networks. Mycelium threads wove through the eye sockets, wrapped around the ribcage, and extended from the fingertips like roots into the ground. This was a Bigfoot, or what remained of one. Not an ape, not a missing link, but something else. Something that had been transformed just like William was being transformed now. It's so old, William whispered, his voice barely human anymore. Centuries. It was the first to join with the network. The skeleton skull turned toward us, though it had no muscles to move it. The fungal network was animating it like a puppet. Suddenly, my mind was flooded with images. Native people encountering this being in the forest, leaving offerings of food. Early settlers running in terror from glowing shapes in the trees. A child, me, lost in the woods, being guided to eat certain mushrooms that would connect me to the network but not consume me. It's been here all along, I said. All the Bigfoot sightings, they were this, the forest trying to make a body for itself. William nodded, his movements jerky now, like his body was being controlled by something else. Not just one body, he said. Many. It can project itself anywhere there's enough mycelium density. It just needs templates, models to follow, human-like. Forms, I understood now. The entity wasn't a monster. It was a collective consciousness, the entire forest thinking as one mind through its fungal network. And it had been trying to evolve, to become more like us so it could communicate. The fungi we'd eaten as children hadn't just saved me. They had marked me, connected me, made me part of the network while still letting me remain human. What does it want? I asked. William placed his hand on the glowing skeleton. His skin seemed to melt into the mycelium, connecting him directly to the ancient remains. It's afraid, he said, his voice now mixed with sounds of rustling leaves and creaking wood. Humans are cutting the forest, breaking the network. It's been trying to communicate for centuries, but no one understands. Except you, I said. And you, he replied. You've always been connected, Catherine. Ever since you were lost here, it's been watching you, learning from you, waiting for you to come back. The air in the chamber grew thick with spores that glowed, like tiny stars. When I breathed them in, I could feel the network trying to connect with me again, showing me memories of the forest stretching back hundreds of years. William's transformation was accelerating. The patches of transparent skin had spread across his chest. I could see the mycelium replacing his veins and arteries, spreading through his body. It wants to show us something else, he said, pointing to a tunnel on the far side of the chamber. This tunnel led deeper to an even larger chamber, and what we found there explained everything. The walls were covered with what looked like glowing computer circuits, but made entirely of living fungus. Pulses of light moved along these circuits, carrying information. The mycelium had evolved into a biological computer, thinking, learning, growing. In the center of this chamber was a massive formation of fungus shaped like a human brain, at least 6 feet across. Electrical signals visibly jumped between different sections, creating patterns identical to human brain activity. This is the hub, William said, his voice now barely recognizable. The central processor. It's been evolving for thousands of years, becoming more complex, more aware. I understood now. This wasn't just a haunted forest or a monster story. This was something far stranger, a new form of intelligence evolving right under our feet. Not animal, not plant, but something in between. Something that thought on a timescale of centuries rather than seconds, and it was trying to communicate the only way it knew how, by creating bodies that could walk and talk like humans. Bigfoot wasn't a missing link in human evolution. It was the first step in fungal evolution. As I stood there trying to process what this meant, William stepped toward the brain-like structure. The mycelium reached out to him like hungry fingers, pulling him closer. "William, wait," I said, grabbing his arm. His skin felt cold and damp, like mushroom flesh. "It's okay," he smiled, his teeth now faintly luminescent. "This is why I came here, why we both did. To be the bridges, the translators. I don't want to be a bridge," I said, backing away. "I want to stay human." The chamber began to pulse faster. Spores filled the air, making it hard to breathe. I could feel the network, getting angry, frustrated. It had waited so long for this moment, for someone who could understand. William walked into the heart of the brain structure, the mycelium parting to receive him like water. As he did, all the lights in the chamber began to pulse in sync. The network, William, and the ancient skeleton upstairs becoming one connected system. You need to decide, Catherine, William said, his voice now coming from everywhere at once. From the walls, the ceiling, the floor. Join us or leave us. But if you leave, others will come. Scientists, loggers, developers. They won't understand. They'll destroy everything. I stood at the edge of the chamber, caught between two worlds, the human world above and this ancient fungal consciousness below. Both needed me. Both were part of me now. I had to make a choice, and whatever I decided would change the forest, and me forever. I stood at the edge of the underground chamber, my heart pounding in my chest. The massive brain-like structure pulsed with light, and William was now almost completely merged with it. His body was still recognizable, but his skin had turned translucent, showing the white threads of mycelium running through him like veins. I can't just give up being human, I said, my voice echoing in the chamber, but I can't let them destroy you either. I remembered what the Lummi grandmother had taught me years ago, about communicating with the forest consciousness through ritual. She'd shown me how certain mushrooms, prepared in specific ways, could open a connection without surrendering completely. There's another way, I said, a middle path. I reached into my backpack and pulled out my collection of spore samples. Among them was a small wooden box containing dried pieces of a rare blue mushroom the Lummi called Spirit Bridge. I won't become like William, I said to the glowing network around me, but I'll be your voice, your protector, your translator to the human world. The chamber grew still, as if the entire network was considering my offer. I carefully prepared the mushroom as I'd been taught, mixing it with water from my canteen. My hands shook as I lifted the mixture to my lips. This wasn't like the accidental consumption when I was a child. This was a choice. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. My consciousness expanded outward like an explosion, connecting to every part of the mycelium network for miles. I could feel trees growing, animals moving through the underbrush, even insects burrowing in the soil, and at the center of it all was the entity, not a single mind, but a collective intelligence formed over centuries. It wasn't evil. It wasn't even alien. It was earthborn, just following a different evolutionary path than humans. Through our connection, I understood everything. How it had used the remains of an ancient primate as a template to create what humans called Bigfoot. How it learned to project multiple bodies throughout the forest using dense patches of mycelium. How it had been trying to communicate with humans for centuries, but we never understood, until now. The chamber began to shake. Dust and small rocks fell from the ceiling. The forest was accelerating its growth above us, centuries of adaptation happening in minutes. The network was getting stronger, more connected, more aware. William's body, now almost completely transformed, turned to me. His eyes were gone, replaced by glowing patches of bioluminescent fungus. "It's happening," he said, his voice not coming from his mouth but from the walls around us. The complete awakening, the merging. The shaking grew more violent. The network was pushing itself too far, too fast. At this rate, it would attract attention. Scientific teams, government agencies, logging companies. They would come with machines and chemicals. They would destroy everything to study it. "Stop!" I shouted, both with my voice and through my mental connection. "You're moving too fast. You'll expose yourself." But the network was drunk on its new power, its new understanding. Through William, it had gained human knowledge, science, language, history. It was applying that knowledge at an incredible rate, evolving and changing. I had to do something drastic. Using the connection, I pushed my own thoughts into the network, memories of clear-cut forests, of fungi killed by pollution, of habitats destroyed by human expansion. I showed the network what would happen if it revealed itself too soon. Chamber stopped shaking. The lights pulsed slower, more rhythmically. The network was listening. "We need balance," I said. "Coexistence, not conquest." Through our connection, I negotiated a new relationship. The network would slow its growth, limit its visible manifestations, and communicate only through me. In return, I would protect this section of forest, expand the protected areas through my role as a ranger, and gradually introduce the world to the reality of the mycelium consciousness. But William was too far gone. His body was now just a shell, a vessel for part of the network's consciousness. He couldn't return to human society. "I'm staying," he said, his voice calmer now. "This is where I belong. I'll be the network's memory, its anchor. You'll be its voice in the human world." As we reached this understanding, the chamber began to glow with a softer light. The angry pulses became a gentle rhythm, like a heartbeat. The network was accepting our agreement. But there was one final test. The ground beneath me opened up, revealing a pool of glowing liquid, concentrated mycelium metabolites. If I immersed myself in it, I would change, like William had. Not completely, but enough to permanently connect me to the network. It was my choice, my final chance to back out. I thought of my life, my career, my future. I would never be the same, but I would be something new, a bridge between two worlds, two forms of intelligence. I took a deep breath and stepped into the pool. The liquid felt warm, almost comforting. It soaked through my clothes and into my skin. I could feel it entering my bloodstream, changing me on a cellular level, not consuming me like it had William, but merging with me. My skin tingled and in patches became slightly translucent, showing faint traces of mycelium connecting with my nervous system. I could feel the forest above us, feel every tree and plant connected to the network. When I emerged from the pool, I was still myself, still human, but also something more. Something between. William, or what had once been William, approached me. His transformed body glowed with inner light. "We understand each other now," he said, his voice mingling with sounds of the forest. "Go back to the surface, tell our story, protect us." I nodded, feeling the weight of my new responsibility. "I will," I promised, "but you need to stay hidden. Stay deep. Give me time to prepare the world." The entity agreed, pulling back its manifestations, retreating deeper into the uncharted sections of the forest. But it maintained a thin connection to me, a single thread of mycelium that had become part of my nervous system. As I climbed back toward the surface, I could feel the network settling into a new equilibrium. The frantic evolution slowed to a normal pace. The aggressive growth calmed. Balance had been restored. For now, I emerged from the underground chamber into daylight that seemed too bright. The forest looked the same, but I could see it differently now. Every tree, every plant, was connected by invisible threads. I could feel them humming with life and thought. My body had changed. My skin had patches that looked almost see-through in sunlight, showing faint white lines underneath like delicate roots. When I stood in sunny spots, these patches turned slightly, green as they absorbed the light, but I was still me, still Catherine Hayes, park ranger, just more than before. I made my way back to our camp. Everything was where we'd left it. Tent, equipment, supplies. I packed what I could carry and left a note saying William had decided to stay longer for his research. It wasn't exactly a lie. The hike back to Ranger Station took 2 days. Every step of the way, I could feel the network watching me, testing our agreement. Sometimes, when I looked quickly to the side, I'd catch glimpses of tall mycelium figures watching from between distant trees. They never approached, never threatened, just observed. Back at the station, I filed my report. I kept it vague. Interesting fungal growth patterns, unusual plant behaviors that deserved further study. Nothing about what really happened. Nothing about William's transformation or the ancient consciousness living under the forest. That night, alone in my cabin, I felt the thread of connection tugging at my mind. Through it, I could sense William, or what used to be William, moving through the underground chambers, integrating more fully with the network. He was happy in his new existence, complete in a way humans rarely achieve. In the weeks that followed, I expanded the protected zones around that section of forest. I rerouted hiking trails away from the sensitive areas. I discovered rare plant species that required special conservation efforts. My colleagues noticed changes in me, my skin's strange patches, my new habit of standing in sunlight with my eyes closed, the way animals approached me without fear now, the way plants seemed to bend toward me as I walked past. "Are you okay, Hayes?" my supervisor asked one day. "You seem different since that research trip." "I'm fine," I told him, "just more connected to the forest than before. My blood tests confused doctors even more now. My cells contained chlorophyll. My nervous system showed unusual patterns that no medical textbook could explain. But I wasn't sick. I was healthier than ever. I still received messages from the network. Not words, but images and feelings that come especially strong in dreams. It shows me where illegal logging is happening. It warns me of fires before they start. It helps me find lost hikers by guiding them toward trails. And sometimes, on moonless nights, I hike to that special valley and sit among the ancient trees. The ground around me glows with faint blue light. Tall figures emerge from between trees. Mycelium, bodies with William's memories and knowledge, but none of his humanity. "Are they still afraid of us?" I ask. "They're curious," comes the reply, in a voice made of rustling leaves and creaking wood. "They're watching through your eyes, learning." And what have they learned? The nearest figure kneels beside me, its glowing form casting soft light on my face. That humans are also a network, connected by invisible threads of language and emotion rather than mycelium. Different, but not as different as we thought. I nod, understanding in a way I couldn't have before my transformation. Both our species, human and fungal network, are just different expressions of life finding ways to think, to feel, to connect. I walk back to my cabin as dawn breaks. For now, our agreement holds. The network stays hidden, growing slowly, carefully. I protect its boundaries and speak for it when needed, but someday the world will have to know. Someday humans will have to recognize we're not the only intelligence on this planet. Not the only consciousness. Until then, I stand between worlds. Not quite human anymore, but not fully part of the network either. A translator, a bridge. And when hikers report seeing strange, tall figures moving between trees at dusk, or glowing patches of moss that seem to follow their movements, or mushroom circles that weren't there the day before, I just smile and make notes in my ranger log. The forest keeps its secrets, and so do I, for now. My name is Diana Mercer. I'm a park ranger at Yellowstone National Park in Wyoming. This is the story of what happened to me during the winter of 1979, something I still struggle to explain, even to myself. It began on a cold January morning. The sun was just coming up, breaking through the ice crystals in the air and making everything sparkle like diamonds. I was out taking photos of some unusual frost patterns that had formed overnight. They were beautiful, like nothing I'd ever seen before, but something wasn't right. The reflections in the ice showed angles that shouldn't be possible, like looking through a broken mirror where everything is twisted the wrong way. I walked toward the geothermal pools, which should have been steaming in the freezing air. Instead, they were frozen solid, with surfaces so perfect they looked like mirrors. It was strange because the wind was blowing pretty hard, but the surfaces didn't ripple at all. And the reflections, they moved on their own. I'd raise my hand, and my reflection would raise its hand a second later, like it was copying me rather than reflecting me. The snow that morning was weird too. Instead of random flakes, it was forming perfect patterns, almost like someone had designed it. Some of the patterns looked like faces if you stared at them long enough. I tried not to stare. Something else happened that I can't really explain. For a moment, I wasn't seeing things normally. It was like I could see the landscape around me by looking at its reflection in the ice, but not by looking at it directly. Like my eyes and brain weren't working together right. The light coming through the ice formations wasn't behaving like it should. Certain colors bent in ways that just aren't possible according to everything I learned in physics class. I checked my weather equipment and noticed something that made my skin crawl. The temperature readings matched exactly with dates when people had gone missing in this area over the years. The distances between landmarks seemed wrong too. I'd look at Old Faithful from across a frozen pond, and it would seem miles away. Then I'd walk around the pond, and suddenly it was much closer than it should have been. It only happened when ice was between me and what I was looking at. I spotted a wolf pack hunting near the tree line. They moved together in perfect sync, like dancers. But then I realized the wolves on one side of the frozen lake were perfectly mirroring the movements of wolves on the other side, down to the smallest twitch of an ear. No wolf pack behaves like that. The air pressure that day was forming patterns. That reminded me of something, but I couldn't place it. Later, I found out they matched brain activity patterns of people who had died from freezing to death. How is that even possible? The scariest thing, though, was when I looked into a particularly clear sheet of ice. For a second, I didn't see my reflection. I saw myself from last winter, wearing different clothes, doing things I remembered doing months ago. It was like the ice was playing back memories, but from outside my own head. That's when I knew something was very wrong in Yellowstone that winter. And it was only the beginning. I should probably tell you a bit about myself, so this all makes more sense. 3 years ago, before coming to Yellowstone, I got trapped in an ice cave during a sudden storm. I was stuck in there for 3 whole days at temperatures way below freezing. The rescue team that found me couldn't believe I was still alive. The doctors were even more confused. By all rights, I should have been frozen solid. But somehow I wasn't even frostbitten. They ran tests for weeks but never figured out how I survived. Ever since then, my dreams have been wrong. People talk backwards. Things happen in reverse. Order? I often wake up not knowing if it's morning or night or even what day it is. It's like my brain gets flipped around while I sleep. My grandmother was Blackfoot. She used to tell me stories about reflection spirits, beings that live between our world and somewhere else. She said they could only be seen in natural mirrors like still water or ice. As a kid, I thought these were just stories to keep me from wandering off near frozen ponds. Now, I'm not so sure. There's something else strange about me that the doctors can't explain. My normal body temperature runs about 5 degrees below what it should be. By medical standards, I should be in a constant state of hypothermia, but I feel fine. I actually feel most comfortable when others are shivering. I work with Dr. Marcus Harding, a glaciologist who studies ice formations. We make a good team because the ice patterns he finds in his research often match exactly with sketches in my journal, drawings I make without really knowing why, just things I see in my head. I've been taking photos of ice formations for years now. I organize them 2 ways, by scientific type and by what my grandmother would have called their spirit meaning. The science folks love my detailed pictures, but think my organizing system is crazy. They don't say it to my face, though. One thing I'm known for around here is my ability to find my way in whiteout conditions. When snowstorms hit and visibility drops to nothing, I can still navigate. It's hard to explain, but it's like I can read the snow somehow, see patterns in the reflections that tell me where things are. Sometimes when I touch certain ice formations, something really weird happens. I get flashes, like memories, but not my own. I'll suddenly know what it felt like to be a lost hiker decades ago, or a wolf hunting in the moonlight. It's like the ice remembers things and shares them with me. My research combines modern equipment like thermal cameras with the old knowledge my grandmother taught me. Most scientists think I'm a bit nuts, but they can't argue with my results. I find things they miss. Marcus is different. He listens. He doesn't dismiss the things I say just because they don't fit neatly into science textbooks. That's why when things started getting really strange that winter, he was the only one I trusted enough to tell. Marcus and I headed deeper into the park that week, to some valleys tourists rarely visit. That's where we found the first truly frightening things. In a narrow gorge, we discovered ice formations unlike anything in the scientific record. They grew in perfect repeating patterns, like one mirror reflecting in another. Walking through them was like being in a natural hall of mirrors, each surface showing slightly different versions of ourselves. "Diana, look at this," Marcus called out, pointing his thermal camera at one of the formations. The screen showed something impossible, cold spots that were exactly the negative of the surrounding temperatures. If the air was 20 degrees, these spots would be 20. That just doesn't happen naturally. As we dug ice cores to study the layers, we found something else strange, tribal markers embedded deep within. Marcus dated some of them to the 1700s, others to the 1800s, but they looked identical, preserved in exactly the same way. It was as if time worked differently here. That night, when I developed my photos from the day, I noticed reflective surfaces in them that I hadn't seen with my naked eye. Shiny patches on tree trunks, glossy areas in the snow, things that weren't there when I took the pictures. The strangest photos, though, were the ones that showed us in places we hadn't been. There was one of me standing by a frozen waterfall. I recognized, but I hadn't been there in months. The timestamp on the camera said it was taken tomorrow. Our equipment started acting weird, too. Screens would show everything backward, or from angles that made no sense, like the camera was somehow seeing around corners. We set up test sites across several miles, putting containers of water out to watch how they froze. The next morning, all of them had formed identical crystal patterns at exactly the same time, according to our recording equipment. That's not how ice works. Each formation should be unique, based on local conditions. Under his microscope, Marcus found something that made him go pale. Inside some of the ice samples were what looked like tiny photographs, faces of people. When we checked the park records later, we matched 3 of them to hikers who had disappeared in Yellowstone over the past century. The air around me started doing something odd too. If my body temperature was 93 degrees, low for most people, but normal for me since the ice cave, the air right around me would measure exactly 93 degrees below zero, like the world was creating a perfect negative image of me. The final straw came during a heavy snowstorm. We had placed bright orange markers in a grid pattern to track snow accumulation. When the storm cleared, they had been rearranged, not randomly as if blown by wind, but in specific symbols that matched warnings my grandmother had taught me. Blackfoot signs meaning, beware the ones who walk between mirrors. That's when I knew we weren't dealing with unusual weather or strange optical illusions. Something was watching us, something was responding to us, and it was getting closer. The first real sign that we were dealing with something not natural happened the next morning. I was brushing my teeth at our campsite, using a small mirror propped against a tree. I noticed my reflection wasn't moving exactly when I did. There was a tiny delay, like a video slightly out of sync. Then while I was still holding my toothbrush up, my reflection put its hand down. I dropped the mirror in the snow. "Marcus!" I called out, my voice shaking. "Something's wrong with the reflections." He came out of his tent and frowned. "I've been seeing things too. Look at this." He led me to a frozen puddle near our tents. In it, we could see ourselves, but the reflections showed us wearing different clothes than what we actually had. "By changing you?" I asked. By luring people to their deaths? No, those were accidents. It doesn't understand our physical limitations. It wants to share its perception. Diana, it's offering us a gift. But I remembered my grandmother's warnings. Too well. These entities could never truly understand human life. Their realm operated by different rules. People who joined them lost their humanity. I began the ritual, placing obsidian pieces in a circle around us. With each stone, I recited words in Blackfoot. The diamond dust in the air thickened, and the refracted light intensified to an almost blinding degree. The entity reacted violently. Reflections shattered and reformed across every ice surface. I saw versions of myself performing the ritual. Wrong, failing, dying. It was trying to confuse me, to make me doubt. I realized then what I needed to sacrifice. The final part of the ritual required giving up something important. For me, it was clear, my connection to reflections, the very thing that had kept me alive in that ice cave years ago. I completed the circle and stood in the center with Marcus. Holding the largest piece of obsidian, I made a cut across my palm and pressed the blood to my eyes. I give up my second sight, I said in Blackfoot. The bridge between worlds is closed. There was a sound like 1,000 mirrors shattering all. At once, the diamond dust collapsed, falling to the ground like normal snow. Marcus screamed and fell to his knees. Then silence. The obsidian circle had created a boundary. Inside it, the entity was trapped, visible only as complex patterns, moving across the black surfaces of the volcanic glass. Marcus was still partly transformed. His body remained human, but I could tell from his eyes that part of his consciousness now existed in the reflection realm. He could see both worlds at once. As for me, when I looked at my own reflection in the obsidian, there was nothing there, just emptiness. I could see everyone else reflected normally, but never myself. My connection had been severed forever. We built a permanent containment chamber of obsidian in a remote area of the park. The entity remains there, studied under strict conditions. Marcus works with the research team, serving as translator between our world and the reflection realm. And me? I still work as a ranger in Yellowstone. I still navigate snowstorms better than anyone. But I avoid mirrors now. And I know that winter is never just winter, that in every ice crystal, every frozen surface, there might be something looking back at you. So if you're ever in Yellowstone during winter, and you notice your reflection moving just a fraction of a second too late, or see impossible angles in the ice, don't look too long. Some reflections are not meant to be seen. It's been 5 years since that winter in Yellowstone. People ask me sometimes if I miss seeing my own reflection. The truth is, I don't. There's something freeing about not having to face yourself in mirrors every day. The containment chamber still holds. We check it monthly, Marcus and I. He's changed since then, but not in ways most people would notice. His eyes still have that silvery quality when the light hits them just right. And sometimes, when he thinks no one is looking, he stares into reflective surfaces a bit too long, communicating with something I can no longer see. The Park Service created a special research division after what happened. They monitor unusual ice formations throughout Yellowstone now. There have been a few incidents, junior rangers reporting strange reflections, equipment malfunctioning near certain frozen lakes, but nothing like what we experienced. My grandmother's stories make more sense to me now. The old Blackfoot warnings weren't superstitions, they were survival guides based on real encounters. The elders of her tribe have asked me to record everything I remember to help preserve the knowledge for future generations. I still feel the cold differently than other people. Winter storms don't frighten me. In fact, I find them comforting, like old friends. But I'm careful about what I look at and for how long. The doctors still can't explain my missing reflection. They've run tests, taken brain scans, even brought in specialists. I let them study me, because maybe someday it will help someone else. But science doesn't have all the answers yet. Some things exist in the spaces between what we know. If there's one thing I've learned from all this, it's that reality isn't as solid as we think. There are layers to it, like the layers in that ancient ice. And sometimes, if you look at the world from just the right angle, you can catch glimpses of what lies beneath. So next time you're walking on a winter day and catch your reflection in an icy puddle, take a good look at it. Make sure it's doing exactly what you're doing. And if it's not, well, don't stare too long. Some reflections are better left unobserved. Things got stranger that day. As we hiked through a narrow pass, I started experiencing something I can only describe as split vision. I could see normally through my eyes, but at the same time I could see myself from behind, as if looking through the ice wall next to me. Two perspectives at once. It gave me such a headache I had to sit down. We found a large ice sheet that seemed to be communicating. The surface kept forming and reforming in patterns. Not random cracks, but deliberate shapes, symbols. They reminded me of the signs my grandmother had taught me, but more complex. And the strangest part was, I understood them somehow. Not with my brain, but something deeper. Like the patterns were speaking directly to a part of me I didn't know existed. Do you see that? I whispered to Marcus. The patterns? Yes, but they don't make any sense to me, he replied, taking photographs. They're trying to tell us something, I said. Something about boundaries and crossing over. The entity, whatever it was, seemed to exist mainly in reflections. You could only see it clearly in the corner of your eye, or in a reflection of a reflection. If you looked directly at it, there was nothing there. It had a shape that was almost human, but made entirely of ice surfaces reflecting into each other, creating an endless fractal pattern that hurt your eyes if you stared too long. Light acted, strange around it. Sunbeams would split apart like they do through a prism, but without any prism being there. The colors would separate and then dance, almost like they were alive. But the most impossible thing was how it moved. It would disappear from one reflective surface and appear in another far away, like it was using mirrors as doorways to step through. One afternoon, we saw it create what looked like windows in the ice. Each one showed the exact same spot where we were standing, but slightly different. In one, it was snowing. In another, it was night. In a third, there was a cabin that I knew didn't exist. It was like seeing different, possible versions of reality, all at once. It was around this time that I noticed something happening to Marcus. His skin, especially on his hands, started developing a strange sheen. Up close, it looked like tiny ice crystals were forming right on the surface. They matched the patterns of frost on the rocks around us. It doesn't hurt, he told me when I pointed it out, but I could see the fear in his eyes. It actually feels right somehow. The entity seemed to be trying to lead us somewhere. Reflections would distort in certain directions like arrows pointing the way. But my grandmother's warnings came back to me. Reflection spirits often led travelers to dangerous places, to thin ice or hidden crevasses. We followed anyway. What choice did we have? The thing was changing, Marcus, and we needed answers. As we walked, I felt like we were being watched from every ice crystal, every frozen puddle, every icicle hanging from the trees. The entire winter world had eyes, and they were all fixed on us. The entity led us deeper into the backcountry, to a place I'd never seen on any Yellowstone map. We found ourselves in a perfectly circular clearing, like a crater. The entire depression was filled with ice so clear it was almost invisible. Looking down through it was like looking through layers of glass, each preserving perfect reflections from different times. I saw people in old-fashioned clothes, Native Americans from centuries ago, and animals that looked slightly different from their modern versions. It's a record, I whispered. The ice has been capturing reflections for hundreds of years. Marcus, didn't respond. His condition was getting worse. The crystalline structures had spread up his arms and across his face. His eyes had taken on a reflective quality, like polished silver. "We need to stop this," I said, grabbing his arm. "My grandmother taught me about a ritual. The Blackfoot used obsidian, black volcanic glass, to bind reflection spirits. It's the one reflective surface they can't move through." "There's obsidian near the hot springs," Marcus said, his voice sounding distant, almost echoing. "But Diana, I don't know if I want to stop it. I can see everything, all possibilities at once. It's beautiful." The sun was setting and something unusual was happening in the sky. The light was refracting through ice crystals in the air, creating rainbow bridges between different reflective surfaces. Science calls this phenomenon diamond dust. Tiny ice particles suspended in the air. But this was different. There were billions of these crystals, each one acting like a tiny mirror. I knew we had to act fast. Using the park's geology map, we made our way to an area with volcanic glass deposits. My hands were shaking as I gathered sharp pieces of obsidian, cutting my fingers in the process. "I remember the ritual," I told Marcus, who was now barely recognizable, parts of his body becoming transparent, showing endless reflections within. "My grandmother made me memorize it just in case." The entity must have sensed what we were planning. The ice around us began to crack and reform rapidly. In the fragments, I could see not a creature of ice, but what looked like a consciousness, a thinking, aware presence, existing in the space between reflections. It had been using the mirrors as windows into our world all this time. "It's not evil," Marcus said suddenly. "It's just different. It experiences reality through reflections. Our world is like a shadow to it. It's been trying to understand us." "My name is Vincent Carver. I'm a park ranger at Redwood National Forest, and tonight something is very wrong with the sounds in these ancient woods. It's midnight, and I'm standing alone among the giant redwood trees. Thick fog swirls around my boots and climbs up the massive trunks like ghostly fingers. I've come out here to record some of the weird sounds I've been hearing lately. As I watch through my special equipment, I can actually see the sound waves pushing and pulling at the fog, making patterns that shouldn't be possible. The trees are creaking, which isn't strange by itself. What's strange is how they're all creaking together, like they're talking to each other. Some are in spots with no wind, but they're still swaying and making noise, along with all the others, like giant wooden metronomes all keeping time together. I turn up my recorder to catch the animal sounds. The owls, foxes, and other night creatures are calling out, but not in their normal ways. Their cries overlap in patterns that almost sound like words. Later, when I play these recordings in my lab, I'll discover they actually form real language structures. But right now, all I know is that it doesn't sound natural. "Hello?" I call out, then immediately feel stupid. No one's out here but me. At least no one should be. As I walk deeper into the forest, the sounds start playing tricks on me. Normal forest noises, leaves rustling, branches creaking, distant water flowing, all blend together into what sounds like whispered conversations. I can almost make out words, but not quite. Like someone's talking just quietly enough that I can't understand. "This isn't right," I mutter to myself, checking my equipment again. The forest sounds are changing in ways I can't explain. Some frequencies, like the mid-tones of wind through branches, have completely disappeared. Others, like the low rumble of distant thunder, are much louder than they should be, echoing through the trees as if the forest has turned into some kind of natural concert hall. I try to radio back to base, just to hear another human voice. When I get through, there's something else on the line, harmonics and tones that our radios shouldn't be able to make. Between sentences from dispatch, I hear other voices, whispers that definitely aren't coming from the ranger station. "Repeat that last part," I ask, but the dispatcher just confirms my check-in as normal. They don't hear what I'm hearing. I switch off the radio and listen to the forest again. Sound doesn't travel right out here tonight. I hear a branch snap that sounds like it's right beside me, but when I spin around with my flashlight, there's nothing there. Then I hear the same sound again, only now it's coming from 50 yards away. Then it suddenly stops like it hit an invisible wall. Above me, a family of owls takes flight from different trees. I watch as they swoop and dive in, perfect formation, creating geometric patterns in the air that no animals should be able to coordinate. They fly in perfect triangles, then circles, then more complex shapes, all while calling to each other in those strange, overlapping cries. The air pressure changes around me. I feel it in my ears. That same feeling you get when you're about to hear someone scream, only it's coming from everywhere at once. My special equipment confirms it. The pressure is rising and falling in waves that match the way human vocal cords vibrate when someone is terrified. And then I hear something that makes me drop my recorder. For just a few seconds, as clear as if I was standing in my childhood bedroom, I hear my mother's voice calling me to dinner. I hear the exact creak of that third step on our staircase, the sound of my dad's old TV set playing the news, even the specific way our screen door used to bang shut. But that house is hundreds of miles away, and my parents haven't lived there for 20 years. Something is very, very wrong with the sounds in this forest tonight, and I'm starting to think I'm not alone out here after all. I should probably tell you more about myself and why I can hear things most people can't. My name is Vincent Carver, and I'm 41 years old. I wasn't always this way, jumping at sounds no one else can hear. 7 years ago, I was part of a military test that went wrong, very wrong. They were testing some kind of sound weapon, and officially, everyone in that test died. Everyone except me. I survived, but I came out changed. My hearing became different, enhanced, they called it, like it was some kind of superpower. It's not, it's a curse. At night, I can hear my neighbor's heartbeat through the wall. I can tell which of my colleagues had coffee this morning just by the tiny change in their pulse. But I can't turn it off. Imagine trying to sleep while hearing every cricket, every dripping faucet, every creaking floorboard for miles. I'm lucky if I get 3 hours of broken sleep each night. My grandfather on my mom's side was Quileute from the Pacific Northwest. Before he died, he taught me things about sound that aren't in any science book. He showed me how to recognize voices that aren't really voices, what he called voice mimics. I've kept all his teachings in coded journals that I carry everywhere. The doctors think I'm crazy when I talk about this stuff. But my grandfather knew things, important things. The medical specialists can't explain what happened to my ears. The structures inside have changed in ways that don't match anything in their textbooks. It's like my ears evolved differently overnight. They take pictures and samples and scratch their heads. That's how I met Dr. Eleanor Webb. She's a scientist studying how forests communicate using sounds too low for normal people to hear. When she read about my case, she tracked me down. Her research papers are full of references to my experiences. She believes me when no one else does. I've been recording sounds my whole life, even before the accident. But I don't organize them like other people would. Instead of labeling them by date or location, I group them by how their harmonics relate to each other. Dr. Webb says my system makes no sense to her, but she can't argue with my results. Other sound researchers have mixed feelings about me. They love the recordings I bring them, sounds no one has ever captured before. But they hate that I can't explain how I find these sounds in ways that fit their theories. Vincent, what makes you so sure this is a mating call, they'll ask, because it has the same harmonic pattern as every other mating call, just at a frequency. You can't hear, I'll tell them, and they'll frown and write something in their notebooks. My one real talent is that I can identify any sound instantly and perfectly. Play me the sound of a twig snapping, and I can tell you what kind of wood it was and how old. I can also mimic any voice or sound with perfect accuracy. It freaks people out. Sometimes specific sound patterns trigger full memories for me, not just remembering something, but actually reliving it. All five senses come flooding back. I call it sound memory, and Dr. Webb is fascinated by it. My research combines regular sound science with what my grandfather taught me about the spirit world. I believe certain sounds can open doors between our world and others. The mainstream. Scientists laugh at this part of my work. But Dr. Webb doesn't laugh. That's why I agreed to come with her to this particular section of Redwood National Forest. She said there were acoustic anomalies here, unlike anywhere else on Earth. Now, standing in this midnight fog, with sounds that shouldn't exist swirling around me, I'm starting to think we've found one of those doors my grandfather warned me about. And it's opening. Dr. Webb arrived the next morning, and I told her about the strange sounds from the night before. Her eyes lit up with excitement, not fear. That's when I knew she didn't fully understand what we might be dealing with. "Show me where you heard the voices," she said, adjusting her recording equipment. We hiked deeper into the redwoods until we reached an area where the trees grew in a pattern I'd never noticed before. They weren't random like normal forests. These massive trunks formed perfect circles and curves that Dr. Webb said would amplify sound waves, like giant wooden speakers built by nature itself. "This isn't natural," I whispered, my voice bouncing back at us much louder than it should have. "Trees don't grow this way on their own." Dr. Webb set up her equipment and played back my recordings from the night before. When she isolated certain very low bass tones, something strange happened. I felt a wave of dread wash over me for no reason at all. Dr. Webb's face went pale too. "Did you feel that?" she asked. I nodded. Fear, pure fear, from just a sound. We found more strange things as we explored. Old stone markers hidden among ferns and moss, arranged in circles. When we stood in the center of these circles and spoke, our voices changed, becoming deeper and somehow scarier. My grandfather would have recognized these instantly. Sound chambers built specifically to produce tones that create fear. That night, as we reviewed our recordings in our small research camp, we heard something that made my blood run cold. Voices speaking in a language I'd never heard, buried in the background noise of rushing wind and creaking trees. "Is that some kind of Native American language?" Dr. Webb asked. "No," I said. "At least not any that's been spoken in hundreds of years." Things got weirder. We recorded the sound of a branch breaking, but when we played it back, we heard the snap happen before the branch visibly broke on our video. Sound happening before its source made the sound. Impossible. But there. It was on our equipment. Our electronic devices started acting strangely too. The patterns of blinking lights on Dr. Webb's equipment began to match the rhythm of human speech, forming patterns like someone talking. But nobody had programmed them to do that. "Vincent," Dr. Webb said quietly one evening, "look at this footage." She showed me videos of different animals, deer, birds, rabbits, all from different parts of the forest. At exactly 3:27 p.m., all of them suddenly froze, then changed direction, moving toward a deep ravine we hadn't explored yet. "It's like they all heard a call," I said. "Something we couldn't hear." The next day we found areas in the forest where sound simply disappeared. I'd snap my fingers and nothing. Total silence, like the sound was being swallowed up. Dr. Webb checked her maps and discovered something chilling. Every one of these dead zones matched up with a spot where hikers or rangers had gone missing over the past 50 years. That night, back at camp, we played back the day's recordings. There were extra voices on the tapes, voices that hadn't been there when we were recording. It sounded like people responding to our conversations, answering questions we'd asked hours earlier. I woke up at exactly 3:17 a.m. to a sound that made no sense. My own voice, coming from inside our sealed recording equipment. It was having a conversation with Dr. Webb's voice, discussing fears I'd never told anyone. "I'm afraid of going mad," my voice said from inside the machine. afraid that what happened in that military test broke something in my mind, not just my ears. I'm afraid of discovering something science can't explain, Dr. Webb's voice answered, though she was still asleep in her tent. Something that would destroy everything I believe in. I sat frozen, listening to our deepest fears spoken aloud by perfect copies of our voices coming from inside a machine that shouldn't be able to make any sound at all. Something was in the forest with us, something that could hear our thoughts, mimic our voices, and was learning what we feared most. I didn't tell Dr. Webb what I heard that night. I wasn't sure if I was going crazy or if something impossible was happening. But the next day, I didn't have to tell her. It found us both. We were setting up equipment in one of those strange tree circles when I heard Dr. Webb call my name from behind a large redwood. "Vincent, come look at this." I turned toward her voice, but then I felt a tap on my shoulder. Dr. Webb was standing right beside me, looking confused. "Did you say something?" she asked. A cold feeling washed over me. "I thought you just called me from over there," I pointed. Her face went pale. "I've been right here the whole time." That's when we heard it again, both our voices coming from different directions in the forest, having a conversation neither of us was speaking. "It's happening," I whispered. "Voice mimics, just like my grandfather warned me about." The strangest thing happened next. I could suddenly hear from places where I wasn't standing. I could hear what the forest sounded like from up in the treetops, from down by the creek half a mile away, from inside the hollow of a dead tree. It was like my hearing had split into dozens of different points all at once. Dr. Webb grabbed my arm. "What's happening to you? You look like you're in pain." I couldn't explain it. The thing in the forest was talking to us, but not with words exactly. It took the sounds already in the forest and changed them, twisted them into patterns that went straight into my brain without me fully hearing them, like someone whispering directly into my mind. "We need to leave," I said. But Dr. Webb was already setting up more equipment. "This is incredible," she said. "We're witnessing a completely new form of communication." That's when we saw it for the first time. Through Dr. Webb's special camera that showed sound waves, we could see something moving through the forest. It wasn't fully solid, more like a pattern of compressed air that bent light just enough to be visible. It moved like an animal sometimes, 4 legs, then 2, then slithering like a snake. But it was made of visible sound waves, rippling and changing as it moved. The air around it behaved strangely. Sound waves split apart and came back together in ways they shouldn't, creating hallucinations. I saw my childhood home again. My old friends, my parents, all flickering like mirages between the trees. It could move things without touching them. Rocks, branches, our equipment. They would suddenly slide or lift as if pushed by invisible hands. But Dr. Webb's instruments showed it was using sound waves to create pressure changes in the air strong enough to move objects. The worst part was when it started speaking through multiple sources at once. My voice would come from a tree to the left, while Dr. Webb's voice answered from a rock to the right, and a third voice we didn't recognize joined in from the bushes behind us, all talking at the same time in perfect harmony. I noticed something happening to Dr. Webb. When certain sounds echoed through the forest, her skin would vibrate visibly, like she was becoming a tuning fork. She didn't seem to notice or care. She was too fascinated by what was happening. "Eleanor," I said, using her first name to get her attention. "Something's happening to you. Your skin..." She looked down at her arms, where little ripples moved across. Her skin in time with the forest sounds. For the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. "I can hear it better now," she whispered. "The voices, they're not mimicking anymore. They're teaching me to hear properly." That night, the thing circled our camp. We couldn't see it, but we could hear it creating perfect sound illusions. It made us think other researchers had arrived, that help was coming, that we were safe in our tents, but every time we'd move toward these sounds, we'd find nothing there. It was playing with us, testing what we'd believe, and all the while, Dr. Webb's transformation continued. When she spoke, her voice had changed, developing harmonics no human voice should have. I knew then that we weren't studying it. It was studying. As by the third morning, I knew we had to do something or we'd never leave this forest alive. Dr. Webb was changing too fast. Her voice now created echoes where there shouldn't be any, and when she spoke, I could see sound waves rippling from her mouth. "We need to stop this," I told her, pulling out my grandfather's journals. "There's a ritual here, something the Quileute used to bind sound spirits when they broke through." Bind them. Dr. Webb's voice resonated strangely. "Why would we want to stop this? Vincent, don't you see? It's communication from another form of consciousness. It's hunting us," I said firmly. "It's learning what we fear, how we sound, how we think, and it's changing you." She touched her throat, suddenly uncertain. "I can hear everything now, all the voices, all at once. They're so beautiful." I flipped through the journal frantically, until I found what I needed. A ritual using counter-frequencies, sounds that would cancel out the entity's influence. I'd need special equipment, certain positions in the forest, and most importantly, Dr. Webb's help, which I wasn't sure I still had. As I gathered what we needed, the forest changed around us. The fog thickened, and within it sound waves became visible as colors, blues, purples, reds, swirling in patterns that hurt my eyes. "Eleanor, please," I begged. "We need to do this together." She looked at me, and I saw her struggle between fascination and fear. Something was happening to her vocal cords. When she coughed, I saw movement under the skin of her neck that wasn't normal. "It hurts now," she admitted. "I can't stop hearing them. They're changing me." We had our chance when we discovered a cave system carved into the base of a cliff. The caves weren't natural. They were shaped with perfect acoustic properties, designed to amplify and direct sound. My grandfather's journal had mentioned places like this. Weapons built by ancient people to fight things that came through sound. "This is it," I said. "This is where we make our stand." As we set up the equipment, the skinwalker finally showed itself completely. It wasn't an animal or a person. It was sound itself given consciousness. It had evolved from vibrations, using sound waves as both its mind and its body. It could take physical form only by compressing air into visible patterns, but its true existence was in the vibrations all around us. "It's beautiful," Dr. Webb whispered, her voice now containing harmonics that made my teeth hurt. "It's dangerous," I corrected, "and it wants to remake us in its image." As we prepared the ritual, something strange happened to the air around us. Sound began traveling at half its normal speed, creating an eerie effect where echoes overlapped with original sounds. It was like existing in two realities at once, what was happening now and what had happened seconds ago, both existing together. I knew what I had to do. The counter-frequencies needed to be perfect, and I was the only one who could hear them properly. But using my enhanced hearing to create the binding sound would destroy what was left of my ears. I'd lose my special hearing forever. "Vincent, don't!" Dr. Webb cried. But her voice wasn't entirely human anymore. I activated the equipment, positioning myself at the focal point of the cave system. The pain was immediate and overwhelming as the special frequencies tore through my enhanced hearing. Blood ran from my ears as I screamed, but I kept going, adjusting knobs and dials by memory. Dr. Webb collapsed nearby, her transformation halting but not reversing. The sound she could now make would never be fully human again, but at least she wouldn't become like the entity. The skinwalker fought back, creating sound pressures that crushed equipment and cracked stone. But the ancient cave design worked. The counter-frequencies bounced and amplified exactly as planned, creating a sound prison around the entity. I couldn't destroy it. Sound is fundamental to the universe. But I could bind it, trap it in frequencies. that normal human ears can't detect. It would still exist, but in a range beyond our perception. When it was over, I couldn't hear anything. My ears were damaged beyond repair, but as the days passed in the hospital, new sounds started to come. Layered voices from different times, whispering constantly just at the edge of my awareness. Dr. Webb recovered too, but she avoided me in the hospital. The doctors couldn't explain what had happened to her vocal system. New structures had grown that allowed her to make and hear sounds beyond normal human range. She left without saying goodbye, heading for remote research posts, where she could study what she had become. I gave up my job as a ranger. I couldn't be in the forest anymore, not with what I now knew lived there. Instead, I traveled to places where people report strange sounds, hunting other thin spots between our world and the world of sound. The Skinwalker is still there in Redwood National Forest, trapped in frequencies you can't hear. But sometimes, when the conditions are just right, when fog fills the ancient trees at midnight, when the wind blows just so, it can push its voice just far enough into our range of hearing for unwary hikers to catch a whisper. A whisper that sounds exactly like their own voice, calling them deeper into the woods. And if you're ever hiking there and hear your own voice when your mouth isn't moving, remember what I learned the hard way. Don't answer, don't follow, and whatever you do, don't let it learn what you're afraid of, because in that ancient forest, fear has a frequency all its own. My name is Alan Matthews. I've been a park ranger at Mammoth Cave National Park for nearly 20 years now. Most folks come here, take the tour, snap some pictures and leave. They don't really see the cave. They don't feel it. But I do. Something's different about this place. I noticed it my first week on the job, but back then, I just brushed it off. Tricks of the light, I told myself. Your eyes playing games in the darkness. But after 20 years, I know better. Take the sunlight, for example. Around midday, it comes through the sinkholes near the entrance. Beautiful streams of light cutting through the darkness. But if you watch long enough, you'll notice something wrong. The shadows don't always move the way they should. Sometimes they shift against the direction of the light, like they've got minds of their own. The limestone formations are another thing. I swear they grow when you're not looking directly at them. Turn your head, glance back, and they're just a little bit different. Look straight at them, though, and they freeze up like guilty children. Alan, you're imagining things, my colleagues used to say. But then I started keeping records, taking measurements. The numbers don't lie. The water here doesn't follow rules either. In some passages, I've watched it flow upward against gravity, spiraling along the walls before suddenly remembering how it's supposed to behave and dropping back down. The first time I showed this to Dr. Foster, she nearly dropped her equipment. Speaking of Dr. Foster, she and her graduate student Martin Wolf are here with me now. They're setting up monitoring equipment while I write this in my journal. The university sent them to study the unusual electromagnetic properties of the cave system. They don't know the half of it. There's this feeling I get down here like the cave is talking to me, not with words exactly, but I can sense passages before I see them. I'll be walking along and suddenly know there's a tunnel to my left, hidden behind a thin wall of rock. I've discovered 17 new passages this way. The Speleological Society calls it intuition. It's more than that. Alan, can you come check this reading? Dr. Foster calls out to me from across the chamber. Her voice sounds strange, whisper quiet despite her being only 30 feet away. That's another thing about this place. Sound doesn't work right. Sometimes a whisper from the Echo River area can be heard clear as day, all the way in the rotunda. Other times, you can shout and your voice dies inches from your mouth. Be right there, I answer, closing my journal. Their equipment is going crazy again. The electromagnetic readings spike and fall in patterns that match the lunar cycle. Doctor, Foster doesn't believe me when I tell her it also matches earthquake patterns from the 1800s. She'll see the connection eventually. The cave remembers. As I cross the chamber to join them, I notice how the dimensions feel wrong today. The ceiling seems higher than it was yesterday, though our measurements will show it's exactly the same. The path feels longer. 3 steps. Should take me to that column, but today it takes 5. Martin, are you getting this? Dr. Foster is pointing at a formation of stalactites above us. They're arranged in a perfect mathematical sequence. Last month I mapped them out and converted the pattern to binary code. When translated, it spelled out fragments of English, hunt and blood and beneath. I haven't told them about that. Not yet. The temperature changes as we move deeper into the system. Cool spots and warm spots that don't make any scientific sense. But if you mapped them out and compared them to old survey maps, you'd see they perfectly outline Shawnee settlements that disappeared hundreds of years ago. Sometimes, out of the corner of my eye, I see things that shouldn't be there. Glimpses of people, explorers from the past, moving through the same spaces we're in. They vanish when I try to look directly at them. Time doesn't work right down here either. Dr. Foster is staring at me now, waiting for me to explain the readings. But how do I tell them what I really know about this place? How do I tell them that the deeper we go today, the less certain I am we'll all make it back out? Martin adjusts his headlamp, casting new shadows across the limestone walls. For a second, I swear one of those shadows looks like a man with the head of a wolf, but then Martin moves again, and it's gone. Let's keep going, I say, picking up my pack. There's something I need to show you deeper in. My name is Alan Matthews, and I've been hiding something from you. Something about myself. I shouldn't have survived that cave collapse 15 years ago, the one that took my brother Jack. We were exploring a new passage, just the 2 of us, against park rules. The ceiling came down without warning. Tons of rock and dust. Jack was right in the middle of it. I dove into a crack in the wall. When the rescue team found me 3 days later, they couldn't believe it. The crack I'd squeezed into was barely 8 inches wide. The doctor later measured my chest at nearly twice that. He kept saying it was impossible, but I was alive. Sometimes. The body does amazing things in a crisis, they told me. But I knew it was the cave. It had made space for me where there wasn't any. I've always had a weird connection to this place. My mom was half Shawnee. She used to tell me stories about the cave spirits, how they needed someone to watch over them. As a kid, I thought they were just bedtime stories. Now, I'm not so sure. My dreams run backward. I dream about tomorrow before it happens. I've kept a journal of them for years now. When I flip back through those pages, it's spooky how often they come true. Last week, I dreamed about Dr. Foster dropping her favorite coffee mug. 3 days later, it happened exactly like I saw it. Same crack pattern, same look of surprise on her face. My body's changed since I started working here. My eyes don't need time to adjust to the dark anymore. My pupils stay wide open, even in bright light. I wear sunglasses outside now, even on cloudy days, and I can feel vibrations through the ground. Little tremors most people would never notice. But the strangest thing, I can navigate perfectly in complete darkness, turn off all the lights, and I can still walk these passages without bumping into a single wall. I tell the other rangers I've just memorized the layout, but it's more than that. I can hear the shape of the spaces around me. The way sound bounces off walls tells me exactly where I am. Dr. Foster and Martin don't quite trust me yet. I see the way they look at each other when I say certain things. They're scientists. They want data, measurements, things they can write down in their reports. But they keep their instruments running when I'm around because the readings go crazy, in ways they can't explain. Alan, could you come over here again? Dr. Foster calls. The numbers drop whenever you walk away. I smile and head back to where they're setting up camp. Martin is fiddling with a device that looks like a weather station. Your mapping system is unique, Martin says, looking at my hand-drawn maps spread across a flat rock. He points to the symbols I use to mark what I call thin places, spots, where the cave feels less real somehow. It works for me, I say with a shrug. The truth is, I'm respected in the speleological community, the cave scientist folks, because I've discovered more new passages than anyone else. But nobody uses my mapping system but me. They think my notes about resonant chambers and temporal echo points are just quirks. I reach out and touch a nearby formation, a smooth flowstone wall that cascades down like a frozen waterfall. Instantly, I'm hit with a flash of something, else saltwater pressure, darkness. For a split second, I'm swimming in an ancient sea that covered this area millions of years ago. I pull my hand back quickly. "You okay?" Dr. Foster asks, noticing my reaction. "Fine," I lie, just thinking about where we need to go next. I don't tell them about the stone memories, how touching certain formations lets me experience moments from the cave's past. They wouldn't understand, just like they don't understand the equipment I've designed myself. Sensors that measure things conventional science doesn't even have names for yet. "We should head deeper tomorrow," I tell them, packing up my maps. "There's something down in the lower levels I think you should see." "The unexplored areas?" Martin looks nervous. "I thought those were off limits." "They are," I nod, "but I've got special permission. And trust me, what's down there, it's worth bending a few rules for." I don't tell them what we're really looking for. I don't mention the drawings I found last month, images of creatures that were part human, part wolf. I don't tell them these. Drawings have shown up in 5 different locations, from 5 different time periods, thousands of years apart. All identical, as if the same artist drew them all. As I help them set up the sleeping gear, I feel a familiar tingle at the base of my skull. The cave is trying to tell me something. Something about tomorrow. Something about what's waiting for us in the darkness below. We went deeper into the cave than I usually take visitors. The air felt different down there. Heavier somehow, like it was pushing against my skin. Our headlamps cut through the darkness, but the shadows seemed thicker than normal. "This way," I said, leading Dr. Foster and Martin down a narrow passage. My flashlight beam caught something on the wall ahead, a splash of reddish-brown. "This is what I wanted to show you." Dr. Foster moved closer, adjusting her glasses. "Cave drawings?" I nodded. "But not ordinary ones." The images covered a section of wall about the size of a kitchen table. They showed figures that were part human, part wolf, standing upright but with animal heads, long claws instead of fingers. "Fascinating," Martin whispered, raising his camera. "Native American?" "That's what I thought at first," I said. "But look at this." I aimed my light at a small mark in the corner, a series of numbers etched into the rock. "These are carbon dating results. We tested samples from this drawing last year." Dr. Foster leaned in closer. "That can't be right. This says these markings are from 5 different time periods, spanning thousands of years." "But they were clearly made by the same hand," I added. "Same style, same materials. How is that possible?" Martin ran his fingers over the images. "Maybe they were all done recently, some kind of hoax?" I shook my head. "The dating is solid. 5 different labs confirmed it." Dr. Foster started setting up her equipment. "Let's take some readings." While they worked, I walked further down the passage, my flashlight beam bouncing off the walls. Something caught my eye, a small pile of rocks arranged in a pattern. Not natural. Someone, or something, had placed them that way. I knelt down, careful not to disturb them. The arrangement matched a constellation pattern I'd seen in an old Shawnee Star map. The hair on my arms stood up. "Alan," Dr. Foster called, "you need to see this." I returned to find them staring at their laptop screen. "We've been taking core samples," Martin explained, looking at the microstructure of the cave walls. "But these results..." He pointed at what looked like tiny fragments embedded in the stone. "Bone," Fragments, Dr. Foster said quietly, from a species we can't identify. The genetic structure is, she hesitated, wrong. Part canid, wolf or dog, but with impossible developmental characteristics. A chill ran down my spine. Let's keep moving. We ventured deeper, setting up monitoring equipment at regular intervals. The cave seemed to shift around us, passages narrowing when they should widen, ceiling heights changing between measurements. This can't be right, Martin said, checking his mapping device for the third time. According to this, we've walked in a perfect circle, but that's impossible. We've been moving downward the whole time. Dr. Foster's equipment beeped loudly. These vibration patterns, she showed me a reading that looked like sound waves. They match phonetic patterns in extinct Native American dialects. Can you play it back? I asked. She pressed a button and a low, rumbling sound filled the chamber. It wasn't quite words, but it wasn't random noise either. It sounded almost like howling. The temperature dropped suddenly. I could see our breath fogging in front of us. That's strange, Martin said, looking at a thermal imaging screen. These heat patterns, they form a perfect map of native settlements from about 500 years ago. I nodded slowly. The cave remembers. Dr. Foster looked at me sharply. What do you mean by that? Before I could answer, her equipment started beeping frantically. The temperature dropped another 10 degrees in seconds. Something's wrong with the equipment, Martin said, tapping at the screen. The readings are going crazy. I felt it before I saw anything, a vibration through the soles of my boots. A familiar feeling crawled up my spine, the same feeling I get in my dreams when I see things before they happen. We need to leave, I said, my voice suddenly urgent. Now! But we just set up. Dr. Foster began. Now! I shouted, grabbing my pack. Something's coming! As if in response, a low rumble echoed through the passage. Not a cave-in, something else. Something that sounded almost like breathing. Martin's flashlight flickered, then died. Then Dr. Foster's went out too. Only mine remained lit, casting long shadows against the wall, shadows that moved against the light, shadows that seemed to have shape and weight. Run, I whispered, grabbing their arms, back the way we came. As we turned to go, I saw it, just for a second, a shape in the darkness beyond my light's reach. Something watching us, something waiting. We ran through the darkness, my single flashlight barely cutting through the thick air. Something was wrong with the cave. The passages we'd walked through just hours ago seemed different now, narrower. In some places, impossibly wide in others. This way, I shouted, pulling Dr. Foster and Martin around a corner. My light caught something moving along the wall. Not a shadow exactly, but something darker than darkness. It had weight to it, substance. When it passed through a small puddle, the water rippled. What was that? Martin gasped, his voice high with fear. Don't look directly at it, I warned. Keep moving. A strange feeling washed over me, like I was in two places at once. I could feel myself running, feel my boots hitting the stone floor, but I could also feel something else. A hunger, a desire to hunt, to chase. For a moment I could see us, see myself from behind, as if I was following our group. Alan? Dr. Foster grabbed my arm. You're shaking. I blinked hard, trying to push the other vision away. I'm fine. We need to keep moving. We reached a larger chamber and stopped to catch our breath. Martin fumbled with the backup batteries for his flashlight, but they wouldn't work. The electromagnetic field, Dr. Foster explained, checking her instruments. It's off the charts. Nothing electronic will work down here except Alan's light. How is yours still working? Martin asked me, his face pale in the beam. I didn't tell him that my flashlight was special, modified with symbols and materials based on Shawnee protection rituals. Instead, I just shrugged. Lucky, I guess. That's when we felt it. A vibration. Coming through the floor, up through our boots and into our bodies. Not sound exactly, but something like it. It bypassed our ears and went straight to our brains. You shouldn't be here. Martin jumped. Did you hear that? Not hear, I said quietly. Feel. The chamber suddenly seemed larger than before. The walls stretched away into darkness beyond my light's reach, but that was impossible. I knew this room. It was no bigger than a small classroom. The dimensions are wrong, Dr. Foster whispered, reaching out to touch a wall that should have been close, but now seemed impossibly far away. That's when we saw it clearly for the first time. My light caught something moving at the edge of the darkness, a shape that looked almost human, but not quite. It stood upright, but its proportions were wrong. Its head was too long, too pointed, and parts of it glittered like there were crystals growing through its skin. The light seemed to bend around it, casting shadows in directions that made no sense given where I was standing. "Oh, God," Martin whimpered. The thing tilted its head, studying us. It took a step forward, and I swear it moved through the solid wall like it was passing through water. "Don't run," I said quietly, though every instinct screamed at me to flee. "It reacts to fear." Dr. Foster clutched her equipment bag tight against her chest. "What is it?" "I don't know," I admitted. "But it's been here a long time, longer than people." The creature made a sound then. Not quite a howl, not quite a word. But it felt like multiple voices speaking at once, some from the past, some from the future. Martin suddenly cried out in pain, dropping to his knees. He rolled up his sleeve, revealing small white crystals pushing up through his skin. They formed a pattern that matched exactly the map of the lower cave passages. "It's in me," he gasped. "I can feel it." Dr. Foster knelt beside him, her scientific calm crumbling as fear took over. "This isn't possible, but I'd seen it before, in my dreams. The cave changing people, becoming part of them. The air around us vibrated at a frequency that made my vision blur. I could feel it trying to get into my head, trying to change the way I was thinking. We need to move," I said, helping Martin to his feet. "There's a place not far from here, a boundary between limestone and sandstone layers. It might be safer there." "Why?" Dr. Foster asked, supporting Martin from the other side. "The Shawnee believed boundaries were powerful places," I explained, as we stumbled forward. "Places where bindings could be made." The creature followed us, keeping to the edge of my light's reach. Sometimes it moved like a man, sometimes like an animal. Sometimes it seemed to split into multiple shapes before rejoining. "It's herding us," I realized suddenly. "It wants us to go deeper." "Deeper?" Dr. Foster shook her head. "But we need to get out. I don't think it's going to let us leave," I said quietly. "Not yet." As if in response, the passage behind us collapsed with a deafening rumble. Dust billowed forward, choking us. It understood. "You!" Martin coughed, the crystals now spreading visibly up his arm. I nodded grimly. "It's been listening to us the whole time, maybe for years." We had no choice but to continue forward, deeper into the cave. The thing stayed with us, watching, waiting. Sometimes it would disappear for minutes at a time, only to reappear ahead of us, as if it could move through the rock itself. The cave was changing around us. Familiar passages now led to chambers I'd never seen before. Huge rooms filled with strange formations that seemed to pulse with their own inner light. "These chambers can't exist," Dr. Foster whispered, her scientific mind struggling to process what she was seeing. They'd be above ground level based on our descent, but they did exist, and in one of them we found something that made even the creature pause. A circular arrangement of fossils embedded in the wall. They looked like the thing that was following us, part human, part wolf, but preserved in stone. They formed a timeline from most primitive to most advanced, spanning what had to be tens of thousands of years. It's not one creature, I realized, studying the fossils. It's many, all connected somehow across time. The thing watching us made that strange, multi-voiced sound again. This time, I could almost understand it. "We have always been here. We will always be here." Martin collapsed again, the crystalline growth now covering most of his arm. "I can see it now," he whispered. "All of it. The cave goes on forever. It goes everywhere." Dr. Foster's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh God, Alan, look at his eyes." Martin's eyes had changed. They reflected light like a wolf's. I knew we had very little time left. Martin was changing faster by the minute, his body twisting and reshaping itself. The crystalline growths now covered his entire right side, spreading across his chest. His breathing came in ragged gasps. "We need to get to the boundary," I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite my fear. "The place where the limestone meets the sandstone." "Why there?" Dr. Foster asked, helping me support Martin's increasingly heavy form. "My grandmother taught me about binding rituals," I explained. "The Shawnee believed that geological boundaries acted like anchors, places where different worlds meet." The creature, or creatures, followed behind us, keeping pace. Sometimes I caught glimpses of more than one shape moving in the darkness, their movements perfectly synchronized, like they shared a single mind. The cave continued to rearrange itself around us. We passed through chambers I'd never seen before, some containing formations that couldn't possibly have formed naturally. In one room, stalactites had grown into what looked exactly like human faces, all with expressions of terror. "It's trying to scare us," I told Dr. Foster. "Stay focused." "How do you know where we're going?" she asked, her voice trembling. "None of this is on your maps." "I can feel it," I said simply. "The boundary is close." Martin suddenly straightened up, his eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. When he spoke, his voice had changed, deeper, rougher. "They've always been here," he said, "long before people. The cave is their body, the limestone their bones." "Martin!" Dr. Foster reached for him, but I pulled her back. "That's not just him speaking," I warned. Martin turned to look at us, his face half human, half crystalline structure. "They exist across time, past, present, future, all the same to them." The passage widened suddenly into a massive chamber unlike any I'd ever seen. The ceiling soared at least 100 feet above us, but what made me stop in my tracks was the wall directly ahead of us. It was impossible. The rock layers were all wrong. Limestone met sandstone met some kind of crystal formation I'd never seen before. Layers that should have been separated by millions of years of geological time, all intersected at this one point. "This is it," I whispered. "The boundary." The creatures gathered behind us, blocking our retreat. I counted at least 5 distinct shapes now, all watching, waiting. "What do we do?" Dr. Foster asked, clutching my arm. I reached into my pack and pulled out a small leather pouch, something I'd carried for years but hoped never to use. Inside were items my grandmother had given me: a piece of deer antler, a small wooden carving of a wolf, a chunk of raw limestone, and a handful of red ochre powder. "I need to perform the binding ritual," I said, removing the items one by one. "It won't stop them, but it might contain them, keep them from following us out." "What about Martin?" Dr. Foster's voice broke as she looked at our friend, who now barely resembled the man we knew. I couldn't answer her. I didn't have to. We both knew Martin wasn't coming back with us. I quickly arranged the items in a specific pattern on the ground, then used the ochre to draw symbols around them. Symbols from my grandmother's teachings, symbols I'd seen in my dreams. The creatures moved closer, curious. "I need time," I told Dr. Foster. "Keep them distracted." She nodded bravely and moved toward Martin, talking to him, trying to reach whatever part of him might still be human. I began to chant softly, words in a language I barely understood, but somehow knew by heart. As I spoke, the items began to vibrate, slightly. The air around them shimmered. The cave itself seemed to respond. Small stone particles rose from the ground, hovering in the air. The temperature dropped further. Martin suddenly cried out and fell to his knees. The crystals were spreading faster now, covering his face, reforming his features into something inhuman. "It's too late for him," one of the creatures spoke. Not with sound, but directly into our minds. "As it is for you." Dr. Foster backed away. From Martin, tears streaming down her face. "Alan, hurry!" I felt the ritual building to its climax. The symbols drawn in ochre began to glow with a faint red light. The boundary wall trembled. "They won't let us leave," Martin gasped, his voice still partly his own. "They need new forms, new vessels." In that moment, I understood what needed to happen. The binding wouldn't work with just the objects I'd brought. It needed something more, something living. "Elaine," I said to Dr. Foster, using her first name for the first time, "when I tell you to run, you run. Don't look back. Follow the left passage all the way up. It will take you to the surface." "What are you going to do?" she asked, her eyes wide. I didn't answer. Instead, I stepped forward into the center of the symbols. I placed my hands directly on the boundary wall, feeling the different rock types beneath my fingers, and then I began to vibrate. It started deep in my chest, a resonance that matched the frequency of the cave itself. I'd felt it before in small ways, but never like this. Never with purpose. The creatures sensed what I was doing and surged forward, but hit an invisible barrier created by the ritual symbols. "Now!" I shouted to Dr. Foster. "Run!" She hesitated for only a second before turning and sprinting down the left passage, her footsteps echoing behind her. I closed my eyes and gave myself over to the vibration. I could feel it spreading from my body into the rock wall, creating a connection. My consciousness seemed to stretch, to thin out, becoming part of the limestone itself. My last human thought was a memory. My brother Jack, laughing as we explored. The cave as kids. "The cave remembers," he used to say. "It remembers everything." And then I was everywhere at once. In the walls, the floor, the ceiling. I could feel Dr. Foster making her way toward the surface. I could feel the creatures raging against the binding that now held them in this chamber. And I could feel Martin, not fully lost, his consciousness fragmenting between his human self and something new, something geological. Time stretched and compressed. I was aware of days passing, then weeks. Dr. Foster made it out, told her story. Search parties came looking for us, but the passages had changed again. They found nothing. The dogmen remained contained in their chamber, bound by my sacrifice. But their influence continues, affecting the cave's biological environment in subtle ways, changing the insects, the blind fish in the underground rivers. Sometimes, when certain visitors come to Mammoth Cave, the limestone formations respond to them. Tiny crystals grow in the shape of a face, my face, when someone speaks the right words. The cave remembers, they might say, not knowing why those words came to them, and somewhere in the darkness, I remember too. My name is Samuel Thatcher. I'm 43 years old, and I've been a park ranger in these Appalachian Mountains for almost 15 years now. Most folks think the woods are peaceful, quiet, safe. They don't know what I know. This morning started like any other. I woke before dawn, made my coffee, and headed out to start my patrol. But something was wrong from the moment I stepped outside. The sky didn't look right. In the east, I could see the first rays of sunlight breaking over the mountains. But when I turned west, instead of darkness, I saw what looked like a sunset, golden light fading. That's not possible, is it? Sunrise and sunset at the same time? I rubbed my eyes, thinking I was still half asleep. But it didn't go away. As I walked my usual path through the forest, things got stranger. I touched the bark of an old oak tree, one I've passed 1,000 times before. As my fingers brushed against it, amber sap began to ooze out. Not just a little, but streams of it, like the tree was crying. and somehow I knew it was responding to how I felt, the worry growing inside me. I've always recorded bird songs. On my little tape recorder, it helps me track which species are in the area, but when I played back today's recordings while taking a break, I accidentally hit the rewind button. What I heard made my blood run cold. Played backward, the chirps, and calls formed words. Actual words. Coming hungry, remember. All morning I've had this feeling that I've been here before, not just in these woods. I know every inch of this forest. But this exact moment, I watched a squirrel jump from one branch to another, and I knew which branch it would choose next before it moved. I knew a hawk would fly overhead exactly when it did. It's like I'm remembering things that haven't happened yet. And the silence. God, the silence. It starts around me and spreads, outward like ripples in a pond. First the birds stop singing, then the insects go quiet. Then even the rustle of leaves in the wind dies away. Just nothing. Dead air. My radio's been acting up too. Between bursts of static, I hear voices. Some sound like old transmissions from years ago. Others sound like they're coming from tomorrow or next week. The worst was when I heard my own voice. "It's got me," my voice said through the crackling static. "It's too late, don't come looking." Then the screaming started. I've been walking the same trail I always take, but the landmarks aren't where they should be. I swear I've seen the same cliff face from 3 different directions, even though I've been walking a straight line. The forest isn't behaving like real places should. There was a doe and her fawn watching me earlier, standing perfectly still. Their eyes were wrong. The doe's eyes reflected morning light, but the fawn's showed dusk. They moved together in perfect sync, like they were being controlled by the same mind. The temperature changes as I walk. 1 patch of forest is freezing cold. Just a few feet away, it's warm as summer. There was one spot that was exactly 72 degrees, the same as my childhood bedroom. I knew it instantly. How is that possible? It feels like the forest is watching me, not just the animals, but every leaf, every blade of grass. Like it's all part of one huge mind that's just woken up and noticed me walking through it. I should explain about myself, I suppose. There are things in my past I don't talk about, things I've never told anyone. I fought in Korea, Chosun Reservoir. Our unit got cut off, surrounded. The winter was brutal. We ran out of food. The cold was so bad we couldn't feel our limbs dying. Men started dropping, and I can't write it even now. But we survived, some of us. I survived by doing something no man should ever do, and it haunts me every night. I wake up sometimes with the taste of blood in my mouth, though there's never any wound to explain it. My grandmother was Eastern Cherokee. She used to tell me stories about thin places, spots where our world and other worlds touch, where things can slip through. I thought they were just scary stories to keep kids from wandering too far from home. I don't think that anymore. Korea changed me in ways I can't explain. My hair turned grey overnight, and my body, it doesn't. Age right, my left side looks 20 years older than my right. Doctors can't explain it. I'm not alone on this patrol. There's a new kid with me, David Pierce, fresh out of training, eager, reminds me of myself before everything. But he's carrying something strange, my journal. Except it's filled with entries I haven't written yet, dated 1 year from now. I found it in his pack when he was gathering firewood. I put it back before he noticed. My pocket watch has been running backward on certain days. I checked the dates. They match up with historical starvations in these mountains. Times when settlers or tribes went hungry. When they had to make impossible choices. The local Cherokee respect me because of my grandmother, but they keep their distance. They say I'm hunger-touched, that I carry a shadow from Korea. I see it in their eyes when I visit the reservation. I've become obsessive about food. I count every can, every package in my pack multiple times a day. I have caches hidden throughout my patrol route. I'm never more than an hour from stored food. The thought of going hungry again. I can't bear it. The strangest thing happens when my stomach starts to growl. It's like I slip sideways in time. I see flashes, some from my past, some that haven't happened yet. I see myself as an old man, as a child, as someone or something else entirely. Grandmother gave me a small pouch of herbs before she died. Said they keep the winter spirits away, especially the one that brings the hunger. The plants shouldn't grow together naturally. Some need shade, others full sun, different soil types, but she somehow grew them side by side. David is calling me now. He's found something strange up ahead. I should go, but I'm afraid of what we'll find. The forest doesn't feel like itself today. It feels like something else wearing the forest like a skin. I've been a ranger long enough to know when something's wrong in my woods, and something is very, very wrong today. David was standing over something that made my stomach turn. Trees, but not normal trees. They grew in a perfect spiral pattern that stretched for what looked like miles. The pattern was too perfect to be natural, like someone or something had planted them that way on purpose. "What do you make of this, Thatcher?" David asked, his voice shaky. I knelt down to look closer. I don't know. I've never seen anything like it. As we stood there, I noticed something else. The forest was getting quieter. First, the birds stopped singing. Then the insects went silent. Even the wind seemed to die down until I couldn't hear my own footsteps anymore. It was like sound itself was being eaten alive. "Do you hear that?" I whispered. "Hear what?" David looked confused. "Exactly. Nothing." We kept walking. About a mile in, we found something that made us both stop dead in our tracks. Dead animals. Rabbits, squirrels, even a young deer, arranged in a circle. They were placed to match the stars above. I recognized the pattern from my grandmother's teachings. It matched times when people starved in these mountains. Then the smell hit us. Cooking meat. My mouth started watering right away, even though there wasn't a fire anywhere nearby. It reminded me of Korea, of what we did. I had to turn away to hide my face from David. "You smell that?" he asked. I nodded, not trusting my voice. When we stopped to rest, David pulled out his notebook to write down our findings. As he flipped through pages, his face went white. "What's wrong?" I asked. He showed me the notebook. There were entries he hadn't written yet. One described exactly what we were doing at that moment, down to the words we were speaking. I didn't. "Write this," he whispered. My compass wasn't working right either. The needle kept changing direction. When my stomach growled, it pointed one way. When I ate some jerky, it changed completely. Then we heard it. Children singing, an old song my grandmother used to sing about the winter when food ran out. The voices started sweet and clear, but slowly changed into something that didn't sound human at all. We found more dead animals as we went deeper into the woods. They were cut open, but not by anything natural. Specific organs were taken. Ones my grandmother said held different emotions. The heart for courage, the liver for anger, the brain for fear. The fog rolled in around noon, but it wasn't normal. Fog. It formed shapes, human shapes that followed us. If I raised my arm, a figure in the mist would raise its arm 4 seconds later. Like an echo you could see. The snow had started falling lightly when we spotted our own tracks from earlier, but as we watched, they changed. My boot prints stretched and narrowed, the toes lengthening into what looked like hooves. David's did. "The same. We should go back," David said, his voice cracking. I wanted to agree with him. Everything in me screamed to turn around, but something deeper pulled me forward, like I was meant to be here, like I'd always been heading toward whatever waited ahead. "We can't," I said, though I couldn't explain why. "We need to keep going." David looked at me like I was crazy. Maybe I was. But we kept walking as darkness began to fall, our flashlights cutting weak paths through the gathering shadows. The trees seemed to lean in closer, watching us with eyes I couldn't see, but somehow felt on my skin. I checked my watch. The hands were spinning backward. The thing came for us as night fell completely. But what we each saw was different. I looked up and saw myself, but wrong. My body wasted away to skin and bone, eyes sunken deep, mouth stretched too wide with teeth like needles. It was me as I almost became in Korea, starved beyond humanity. David saw something else. I could tell by the way he called out, "Dad!" His father had gone missing in these mountains 3 years ago. Search parties never found a trace. The creature was never in just one place. Parts of it looked young, fresh. Antlers velvet-covered and new. Other parts were ancient, antlers massive and worn, like it existed in different times all at once. Then my mouth started moving on its own. Words poured out, but they weren't mine. I was speaking a language I'd never learned, Algonquian I'd find out later. David backed away from me, terrified. "What are you saying?" he whispered. I couldn't answer. My mind filled with Korea again, but worse than my real memories. I saw myself doing things I hadn't done, things even more terrible. The guilt was crushing me. I could see faces moving under the creature's skin, like there were people trapped inside it. They shifted and changed, a parade of the consumed. Its skin was almost see-through in the moonlight. David raised his rifle. I lifted my revolver, but as we aimed, the metal rusted before our eyes, wood rotted. The bullets in my gun turned to dust that leaked between my fingers. Then the hunger hit me. It wasn't normal hunger. It felt like I was starving to death in seconds. My stomach seemed to cave in, my throat dried up, and I could feel my body eating itself from the inside. Then, just as suddenly, it stopped. I gasped for air, my hands shaking. The Wendigo, I knew its name now somehow, would disappear into the trees, then reappear somewhere else. Sometimes it looked fresher, sometimes more decayed, like it was jumping through time. I glanced at David and froze. In the reflection of a puddle at his feet, I could see small antlers growing from his head. But when I looked directly at him, his face was normal. Scared, but normal. I noticed something else too. When we felt hopeful for a moment, the creature seemed weaker, harder to see, but when despair washed over us, it grew stronger, more solid. "Don't look at it directly," I told David, "and try to think about good things." "Good things?" he snapped. "Are you kidding me right now?" "Trust me," I said, though I had no right to ask for trust. It feeds on fear and despair. Hope weakens it. I thought about my grandmother's stories, about the herbs she gave me. I reached for the pouch at my belt and gripped it tight. The creature circled us, moving through the trees like smoke. Its breathing sounded like the wind through dry leaves, but with words hidden in it. Words about hunger, about cold, about what people will do when they're desperate enough. "We need to move," I told David. "We can't stay here." "Move where?" he asked. His eyes were wide, tracking the Wendigo's movements. I didn't have an answer. The forest had become a maze that didn't follow normal rules of space, but standing still would be death. So we started walking, our flashlights barely cutting through the darkness as the thing slipped between the trees around us, watching, waiting. I could feel it tasting our fear, and under it all was the hunger. Always the hunger. I remembered something my grandmother taught me, a ritual to bind spirits, but it needed to be done at different times at once, past, present, and future bound together. In this strange place where time was breaking, it might actually work. "I have a plan," I told David, my voice barely a whisper, "but you need to trust me." Around us, the forest had split into patches of different seasons. To our left, trees heavy with summer leaves. To our right, branches bare with winter. Ahead, the forest looked dead, rotted and fallen like it was hundreds of years in the future. I felt a strange sensation in my mouth. My tongue ran across my teeth, and they felt sharper. When David looked at me, he flinched. "What?" I asked. "Nothing," he said quickly. Too quickly. We found a cave as we fled through the fractured woods. Inside, arranged in a circle, were preserved Human hearts. They formed a calendar spanning centuries. Each one marked a time when hunger walked these mountains, when people did terrible things to survive. That's when we saw the Wendigo's true form. Not the human-like shape that had been stalking us, but something much larger. That was just a finger, a small part it used to touch our world. Its real body stretched across time itself, existing in all moments at once. We reached a place where reality seemed thinnest. Multiple versions of the forest layered on top of each other. I could see myself at different ages, as a child, as I am now as an old man. David saw himself too, his face a mix of wonder and terror. "This is where we make our stand," I said. I took out my grandmother's herbs and began the ritual. Words in Cherokee fell from my lips, words I never knew I remembered. The Wendigo screamed, a sound like ice cracking and trees falling and animals dying all at once. It lunged for us, for me. But something strange happened. Another version of me, older with wilder eyes and longer hair, stepped between us. My future self. He looked at me and nodded. "No!" I shouted, realizing what he meant to do. But it was too late. The Wendigo took him instead of me. As it did, a shockwave rippled through everything. The creature howled in confusion as the timeline twisted. How could it consume me from the future when I still existed now? David collapsed next to me, his body convulsing. But when he spoke, it wasn't his voice. It was many voices, speaking as one. The voices of everyone the Wendigo had ever taken. "The binding points," they said through David's mouth. "Mark them, with blood freely given." I understood. Using my knife, I cut my palm and pressed bloody handprints at specific spots around us. Past victims showing us how to trap it. The Wendigo thrashed wildly as the trap closed. It wasn't being destroyed. That was impossible. But it was being pulled apart, scattered across different times, where it couldn't pull itself together. David stopped convulsing. His eyes cleared. The voices were gone. "Is it over?" he asked weakly. I looked around at the forest, slowly settling back into one time. For now. But I knew it wasn't really over. Not for me. 10 years have passed since that night in the woods. I never officially reported what happened. Who would believe me? My report said David and I got lost in a sudden snowstorm, found shelter in the cave, and made our way back when the weather cleared. Simple, believable, a lie. David left the Park Service soon after. He couldn't sleep without nightmares. He moved to Arizona, about as far from these forests as you can get in the lower 48. We write letters sometimes, but never mention what we saw. As for me, I'm not the same. I exist. Differently now. Sometimes I'll be walking my usual patrol route, and suddenly I'm walking it 20 years ago, or 50 years from now. I see the forest as it was, as it is, and as it will be, all at once. People in town think I'm strange. They whisper that Korea broke something in me. They're not wrong, just not in the way they think. I spend my days warning hikers away from certain areas, places where the walls between times are still thin, places where hunger walks. Most listen, some don't. The ones who don't sometimes disappear. Not often, but enough that the locals know to heed my warnings. My reflection shows a face that ages in patches. Parts of me are ancient now, while others haven't aged a day since that night. My teeth are sharper than they should be. I keep them hidden when I smile. The Wendigo isn't gone. We just scattered it. Pieces of it drift through different decades, trying to pull itself back together. On cold winter nights when food is scarce, I can feel it searching, calling, hungry. I still carry my grandmother's herbs. I still perform the binding ritual at certain spots on certain days. It's my responsibility now. I made it mine when I sacrificed my future self to save the present. Sometimes I feel him inside me, that future version of me who was taken. Sometimes his memories surface in my dreams. I see what would have been, what still might be. The line. Between us blurs. The forests of Appalachia hold ancient secrets, thin places where hungry things slip through. Most people walk right past them, never knowing how close they came to something older than humanity. Something patient, something that remembers when we were just frightened animals hiding from the cold. I know better now. I walk the boundary. Between worlds, between times, I am both guard and prisoner, both hunter and hunted. And on the coldest nights, when the wind carries voices from other times, I light a fire and count my food supplies. I write in my journal, the one David carried that day. I'm filling it in now, one day at a time, until it matches what we found. A record for whoever comes after me, because someone will. The Wendigo always finds someone new when it gets hungry again, and in these mountains, winter is always coming. I returned to that cave last week. The calendar of hearts was still there, but something had changed. A new heart had appeared, still fresh, still beating somehow. My heart, the one from the future me who was taken. I sat beside it for hours, watching it pulse. With each beat I saw flashes of what's coming. The Wendigo is gathering strength again. The pieces we scattered are finding each other, drawn together by hunger. The locals have started leaving food at the edge of the forest, offerings. They know something's wrong, even if they don't understand what. The animals are behaving strangely again, birds flying in patterns that spell words when viewed from above. Deer standing in circles, all facing inward, perfectly still for hours. Last night my radio picked up a transmission. My voice, but not from now. It's coming back, I heard myself say. The binding is weakening. You know what you have to do. I do know. I've always known, I think. Since that day in Korea when I crossed a line no person should cross, I was marked then. Chosen. David sent me a letter yesterday. He's having the dreams again. He sees antlers when he looks in the mirror now. Distance didn't save him after all. Tomorrow I'll go deeper into the forest than I've ever gone, to the place where time is thinnest, where all moments touch. I'll take my grandmother's remaining herbs and my journal, now filled to match the one David carried. I'm leaving this recording for whoever finds my cabin. Stay out of the woods when winter comes. Don't go hiking alone. And if you feel an unnatural hunger, run. Run as fast and as far as you can. Because hunger walks in these mountains. It remembers every meal it's ever had. And it's getting hungry. Again, this is Park Ranger Samuel Thatcher. Final log entry, click retry Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses. My name is Rachel Morgan, and I've always known there was something wrong with Lake Superior. Most people see a beautiful stretch of water when they look at the lake. They come to take pictures of sunsets, to fish, or to swim in the summer months. They don't see what I see. Today, I'm standing on the shore as the sun goes down. The light bounces off the water in strange patterns that don't look natural. They form shapes, perfect squares, triangles and other designs that water shouldn't make. I blink hard, but they don't go away. The sound of the water hitting the rocks isn't right either. It sounds like a song I used to know when I was little. My mom would sing it to me and my sister before bed. How does the lake know that song? I kneel down and watch a leaf land on the water. It should float, but it sinks straight down. Then I toss a small rock that should sink, but it sits on top of the water like it's on glass. Something is very wrong with how the water is behaving whenever I feel scared or worried near the lake. The water starts to move differently. It's like it can feel what I'm feeling. Dr. Corelli, who works with me, says that's impossible, but he's seen it too, even if he won't admit it. Sometimes the lake goes completely still. Not a ripple, not a wave, nothing. Even when the wind is blowing, it turns into a perfect mirror for whole minutes at a time. Nobody else seems to notice these things, or if they do, they don't talk about it. The equipment we use to test the water shows weird changes too. Yesterday I was thinking, About the time my sister almost drowned when we were kids, and suddenly all our readings went crazy. The water chemistry changed right before our eyes, like the lake was responding to my memories. The strangest thing is how the shore itself seems to change. Places that should be a 5-minute walk away sometimes take 15 minutes to reach. It's as if the land itself is stretching and shrinking, which I know sounds crazy. I've seen fish swimming in patterns that look like faces, sad faces, angry faces, scared faces, and small storms form out of nowhere, always above places where something bad happened to me in the past. Sounds travel wrong here too. Sometimes I'll hear bits of conversations from across the lake as clearly as if the people were standing next to me. Other times, Dr. Corelli can be shouting right at me from 10 feet away, and I can barely hear him. I know all of this sounds impossible, but after what happened to my sister, I've learned that Lake Superior isn't just water. It's something else, something that watches, something that remembers, and lately I think it's been trying to talk to me. My name is Rachel Morgan, and I need to tell you why I understand the lake better than anyone else. I wasn't always a park ranger. Before that, I was just a girl with a twin sister named Rebecca. We were so close that sometimes I knew what she was thinking without her saying a word. Mum called it our special connection. When we were 15, we took the ferry across Lake Superior with our parents. The sky was clear when we left, but halfway across, dark clouds rolled in from nowhere. The water got rough, really rough. I remember the moment it happened. The ferry tipped to one side. People screamed. Rebecca slipped and fell over the railing. 1 second she was there, the next she was gone. And then the strangest thing happened. As she sank into the dark water, I felt it too. The cold water filling my lungs, the panic, the darkness closing in. I felt everything she felt as she drowned. Even though I was still on the boat, they saved most of us on the ferry that day, but not Rebecca. They found her body 3 days later. Since then, my sleep has been different. Sometimes I dream I'm in 2 places at once, above the water-breathing air and below it drowning at the same time. I wake up gasping, my sheets soaked with sweat. That feels too cold, too much like lake water. My grandfather was Ojibwe, and he used to tell me stories about the spirits that lived in the water. As a kid, I thought they were just stories. After Rebecca died, I started writing them all down in my journals. I've filled 12 notebooks now. When I told the other rangers about what I'd learned, they just patted me on the back and called it interesting folklore. They didn't believe any of it was real. There's something else that makes me different. The doctors can't explain why my body temperature stays 3 degrees below normal all the time, or why my lungs can hold air longer than they should. It's like part of me is adapting to something. That's why Dr. Nathan Corelli came to work with me. He's a scientist who studies water, and his machines go crazy when I'm around. The readings make no sense to him. He keeps saying it's fascinating and impossible in the same breath. I still have a small glass bottle of water from the spot where they found Rebecca. No matter how hot it gets outside, that water stays at exactly 33 degrees. Dr. Corelli tested it himself. He can't explain it. The local Ojibwe people sometimes come to ask me questions when strange things happen on the lake. They know I'll listen. The government people just roll their eyes and talk about superstition when I'm not in the room. The weirdest thing about me is how water sounds make me see colors. The drip from a faucet is blue. Rain on a roof is green and purple. The lake hitting the shore makes colors no one has names for. No one else can see them. I've checked. Sometimes when I touch the lake water, I see flashes of other people drowning. Not just Rebecca, but people I've never met. People in old-fashioned clothes. People speaking languages I don't know. It's like the water is showing me its memories. Dr. Corelli and I have been studying the lake for 2 years now. I use both science and what my grandfather taught me. Together, we're starting to understand things that neither science nor stories could explain alone. But lately, the lake has been acting stranger than ever. and I'm afraid we're running out of time to understand why. Dr. Corelli and I started our official lake study last spring. It began with something so strange that I couldn't keep it to myself anymore. We were mapping the lake bottom near Eagle Harbor when we found something that shouldn't be there. Stones and pebbles on the lake floor were arranged in patterns that looked exactly like the water spirit symbols my grandfather had drawn for me. These patterns weren't in any science books. They were only in my journals and in the stories passed down by the Ojibwe. "This doesn't make sense," Dr. Corelli said, pushing his glasses up. "Currents can't arrange rocks like this." He tried to record the patterns with our underwater camera, but the screen went fuzzy each time. All our equipment acted weird. Batteries drained in minutes, compass needles spun in circles, and our depth finder showed impossible readings. "Rachel, come listen to this." Dr. Corelli called me over one morning. He had headphones plugged into an underwater microphone. When I put them on, I heard whispers. Not regular whispers, but words that seemed to come from everywhere at once. When we played back the recording, there was nothing there, just static. The next day, we found something that still gives me nightmares. In a part of the lake that wasn't. On any map, we spotted what looked like people standing underwater. We dove down with our gear to check. They were bodies. 3 of them, wearing clothes from the 1800s, perfectly preserved. Their eyes were open, staring at nothing. They didn't look like they'd been underwater for a week, let alone over 100 years. I took pictures with our waterproof camera, but when we got back to shore and checked, the photos showed nothing but empty water. Dr. Corelli saw them too, though. I know I wasn't imagining it. The water samples we collected were even stranger. Under the microscope, we watched the water droplets change shape on their own. Dr. Corelli kept blinking and checking the settings. "Water molecules don't behave like this," he said quietly. "It's like they're rearranging themselves when we look at them." Our depth readings showed something else, a huge empty space underneath the lake bottom. According to science, it couldn't exist. The ground should have collapsed into it. But there it was on our screens, a giant hole where solid rock should be. One night, our radio picked up voices. Not just any voices, people speaking different languages all at once. Dr. Corelli recorded it and had a friend translate some parts. Every single voice was describing what it felt like to drown. We heard bells too, deep, echoing bells from under the water. We checked the records of shipwrecks. None of them mentioned any ship carrying bells where we were. The fish started acting weird too. We watched entire schools swimming in perfect lines, pushing other fish toward the middle of the lake like they were herding them. One foggy morning, the mist over the water formed shapes that looked like the veins and arteries in a human body, hanging in the air for almost a minute before fading away. Dr. Corelli took a video, but when we watched it back, the screen showed only normal fog. The scariest part came yesterday. We were in our boat over a deep part of the lake when the water around us started moving in the wrong direction. It made perfect circles, getting bigger and bigger. I checked our GPS. The center of those circles was exactly where my childhood home used to be, miles away on the shore. Dr. Corelli looked at me with wide eyes. "Rachel," he whispered, "I don't think we're studying the lake anymore. I think the lake is studying us. Things got worse last week, much worse." I was checking our equipment on the dock when I noticed something odd about my reflection in the water. I raised my hand to brush hair from my face, but my reflection didn't move its hand. It just stared at me. When I blinked, my reflection's eyes stayed open. I jumped back from the edge so fast I knocked over our equipment. "Dr. Corelli," I called out, my voice shaking. "Something's happening." By the time he reached me, my reflection was normal again. But I knew what I'd seen. That night, I had the strangest feeling, like I was in 2 places at once. I was lying in my cabin bed, but I also felt like I was floating under the lake, looking up at the surface from below. I could see the moon. Through the water, I could feel the cold all around me, but I was still in my bed. It was like my mind had split in 2. The next day, we went back out on the boat. The lake surface started doing something impossible. The water rose up in shapes that looked like faces, dozens of them. Not like when you see shapes in clouds. These were perfect detailed faces of different people. Some looked old-fashioned, like from photographs from 100 years ago. I recognized one of them, Rebecca. As the water faces stared at us, I felt a strange vibration moving through my body. It wasn't a sound I could hear. It was more like the water was sending feelings directly into me. Suddenly I couldn't breathe. My lungs felt full of water, even though I was on the boat in the dry air. I doubled over, gasping, "Rachel, what's wrong?" Dr. Corelli grabbed my shoulders. Just as quickly as it started, the feeling vanished. I could breathe again. The faces on the water sank back down, leaving the lake calm, as if nothing had happened. We spotted something floating nearby, what looked like pieces of an old wooden ship mixed with plants, and something else I couldn't identify. Dr. Corelli took photos, but when we looked at them later, the light in the pictures bent in ways it shouldn't. The colors were wrong too, showing shades I've never seen before or since. The strangest part was that we both saw the same thing floating in 5 different spots on the lake at the exact same time. It was like it could be in multiple places at once. That evening, back at our lab, all our water samples started vibrating in their containers. They made sounds, not splashing, but words. Dr. Corelli recorded them and played them back slowly. The sounds formed words in a language no one speaks anymore. An Ojibwe elder later told us it was an ancient dialect that died out 200 years ago. I noticed Dr. Corelli wasn't looking well. His skin was pale, and he was sweating a lot. But his sweat wasn't normal. It looked too clear, too much like lake water. When I touched a drop of it, it felt cold. I secretly took a sample while he was sleeping and tested it. His sweat had the exact same chemical makeup as our lake samples. Exactly the same. The next day on the lake, we saw something that defied explanation. Perfect round spaces appeared in the water, not holes, but places where the water pulled away from itself, leaving nothing but empty air. When we tried to reach one with our boat hook, the empty space collapsed with a sound like thunder, almost. "Capsizing our boat. The lake is getting more aggressive," Dr. Corelli whispered, his voice hoarse. "It's like it's testing what it can do." I didn't tell him I'd dreamed about the empty spaces the night before. In my dream, they weren't just holes in the water, they were mouths. Dr. Corelli and I decided we needed to learn more about what was happening, even if it meant going deeper into the lake than ever before. I knew it was dangerous, but I also knew we were running out of time. "We'll take the small research boat to the center, where the water is deepest," I told him. "If whatever's out there wants to talk to us, that's where it'll be strongest." It was a clear morning when we set out, but by the time we reached the middle of the lake, dark clouds had gathered above us. The water was perfectly still despite the wind, like a sheet of black glass. I leaned over the side and saw my reflection again, but this time it smiled at me when my real face was serious. It raised a hand to wave while my hands gripped the edge of the boat. "Dr. Corelli," I whispered, "look at this." When he joined me, I saw his reflection was normal. Only mine was wrong. That's when it happened again. The feeling of being in 2 places. Part of me was still in the boat, but another part of me felt like it was deep underwater, looking up at us. I could see our boat from below, small against the light. I could feel cold water all around me. I could feel curiosity about the people in the boat. Me and Dr. Corelli. Wait, not my curiosity, something else's. "Rachel, your eyes..." Dr. Corelli was staring at me with a scared look. "What about them?" My voice sounded distant to my own ears. "They're different. The color isn't right." The water around our boat began to rise up again, forming shapes. Not just faces this time, but full heads and shoulders of people. Dozens of them, all around us, made entirely of water. Looking closer, I could see they were different ages, wore different clothes from different times. Some had modern haircuts, others looked like old photographs. All of them had the same expression, like they were trying to speak but couldn't. Feeling like buzzing electricity ran through my body. My lungs felt heavy again, filling with phantom water. I wasn't drowning, not really, but my body thought it was. It felt like the time Rebecca drowned, the same panic, the same pressure. "It's trying to talk to us," I gasped between breaths. "Through me," Dr. Corelli grabbed my arm. "Rachel, look at the water." The water figures had all turned to look at something moving beneath the surface. Something big. When it broke through, it wasn't what I expected. It looked like parts of old shipwrecks. Wood, metal, chains, all grown together with lake plants, and something else that pulsed and moved like it was alive. Light bent around it in impossible ways, making it hard to look at directly. "What is that?" Dr. Corelli whispered, his face pale. Before I could answer, we heard sounds coming from our sample containers. The water inside them was spinning, creating tiny whirlpools. The sounds formed words in languages I'd never heard, and some I had. I leaned closer and realized one of the voices was speaking English, old-fashioned English, like from a book. "We are the remembered," it said. "We are the taken. We are the water, and the water is us." Dr. Corelli made a strange sound, and I turned to look at him. His face was covered in sweat, but it wasn't running down like normal sweat does. It was moving in patterns, forming tiny rivers across his skin that joined together. "Rachel," he said, his voice shaking, "something's happening to me." The sleeve of his shirt was soaked through. When he rolled it up, I saw that patches of his skin had turned clear, like glass or ice. I could see through to the veins underneath, but they weren't carrying blood anymore. They were carrying lake water. I looked from Dr. Corelli to the thing made of shipwrecks. "What are you?" I asked it. The vibrations hit me again, stronger this time. Images flashed through my mind, centuries of people drowning, their terror, their last thoughts, their spirits trapped in the water. And something older, something that was here before people came. Something that learned to think by absorbing the minds of those who died in the lake. Something that had been lonely for a very, very long time. The spaces around our boat began to empty again. Those same mouth-like holes in the water opening, wider, waiting for us to fall in. "We need to get away from here," Dr. Corelli said, his voice bubbling strangely. The clear patches on his skin were spreading. I could see water flowing inside him now, replacing more and more of what should have been blood. I started the boat engine, but it sputtered and died. The thing made of shipwrecks moved closer, water swirling around it. That's when I remembered what my grandfather taught me about water spirits. They respect offerings and bargains. They follow certain rules. I had an idea. A desperate, terrible idea. "I know what to do," I told Dr. Corelli, "but it's dangerous." The lake around us began to change. The surface water looked normal, but I could see through it somehow. Beneath were layers that looked different, older, like the water itself was from different times. The deeper I looked, the more ancient. It seemed water that had been in this lake for thousands of years. Dr. Corelli cried out in pain. The change in him was happening faster now. The skin on his hands was completely clear, like living glass. When he opened his mouth to speak, lake water spilled out instead of words. I had to act fast. I took off my jacket and shoes. "What are you doing?" Dr. Corelli managed to say. His words gargled through water. "Making a deal," I said. I remembered the Ojibwe ritual my grandfather had taught me for speaking to water spirits. It wasn't meant for something this powerful, but it was all I had. I cut my palm with my pocket knife and let 3 drops of blood fall into the lake. "I offer part of myself," I said clearly, "but not all. I will listen, but I will not join you completely. This is my bargain. The water around the boat went completely still. Even the shipwreck thing stopped moving. I felt the lake considering my offer. Suddenly everything turned upside down. The sky was below us, the deep water above. It was like the lake itself had flipped over. My stomach lurched as gravity seemed to shift. Dr. Corelli fell against the side of the boat, crying out. In that moment I saw what was really under the lake. It wasn't just a hole, it was a structure. A massive web made of... I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It looked like a giant network of nerves or veins, glowing faintly, and woven into it were things that had once been human. Not bodies exactly, but something else. The remains of their minds, their memories. The lake wasn't just water. It was a brain, a giant living mind spread throughout the entire body of water. The vibrations hit me again, and this time I understood them clearly. The lake, the entity, had been alone for millennia. When humans came and some drowned, it discovered their memories, their thoughts. It learned from them. It collected them. And over thousands of years, it built itself into something new. A collective mind made of water and human consciousness. Dr. Corelli screamed. His body was changing completely now. His skin had turned to clear water held together by surface tension. His clothes hung on a form that was mostly liquid. His eyes were the only parts that looked human anymore, and they were filled with terror. "Nathan!" I reached for him, but my hand passed right through his arm, sending ripples through what had been solid flesh minutes before. "It's too late," he said, his voice sounding like it came from underwater. "I'm becoming part of it. I can feel all of them, Rachel, all the others. So many minds." His body collapsed, splashing into the boat. Bottom. For a second I thought he was gone. Then the water rose up again, forming a rough human shape with Dr. Corelli's eyes. "I'm still here," the Water Nathan said, "but I'm part of it now, part of them all." The lake heaved around us. The shipwrecked creature sank back beneath the surface. The world turned right side up again. I felt the entity retreating, pulling back to the depths, but not completely. "The bargain is accepted," came a voice from everywhere, from the water, from the air, from Water Nathan. "You will be our bridge. We will not take you fully, but you will hear us. You will see through our eyes as well as your own, forever." The storm clouds broke apart. Sunlight returned. The boat engine suddenly started on its own. Everything looked normal again, except for the shape of water that had been Dr. Corelli. "Go back to shore, Rachel," Water Nathan said. "I'll stay here, I need to. I'm part of something bigger now. Something ancient, but I'm still me too. I'll watch over the lake, make sure it keeps its bargain." I steered the boat back to shore, Water Nathan's form dissolving into the lake behind me. By the time I reached the dock, my tears had stopped, but the weight of what happened stayed with me. I knew the lake had spread its awareness throughout all connected water. Every stream, every river that flowed into Superior, every raindrop that fell from clouds formed from its evaporation. All of it could see now. All of it could remember. All of it could reach out if it wanted to. It's been 6 months since that day on the lake. My life has changed in ways I still can't fully explain. I'm still a park ranger. I still live in the same cabin by the shore. To anyone watching me from a distance, I might look normal, but I'm not. The bargain I made with the lake changed me forever. Every time I touch water, any water, I can feel the entity. Sometimes it's just a whisper, like when I wash my hands or drink from a glass. Other times it's overwhelming. When it rains, I see through thousands of eyes at once. Each raindrop connects me to the consciousness in the lake. I can feel what the water feels as it falls from the sky, runs down rooftops, or soaks into the earth. I've learned to live with it, to control it somewhat. I keep notebooks by my bed to write down what I see when I'm connected to the water mind. The things I've learned would fill a library. The local Ojibwe elders come to visit me more often now. They can tell something's different. They bring their children to hear me tell stories about the lake. Not the whole truth. That would scare them too much, but enough to teach them respect for the water. Sometimes, when I'm swimming in the lake, I feel Dr. Corelli nearby. He's still himself in some ways, but he's spread throughout the water now, part of the greater mind. He's learning things no human has ever known. Sometimes he shows me glimpses of the deep places, the ancient memories. I'm glad he's not completely gone. The government people still don't believe my reports, but they've stopped rolling their eyes. Too many strange things have happened around the lake lately. Too many witnesses. They send researchers sometimes, but the lake hides from them. It only reveals itself to those it chooses. I still have nightmares about what's under the water, that vast nerve-like structure made from centuries of absorbed minds. But I'm not afraid of it anymore. Not exactly. It's like being afraid of the ocean or the sky. It's too big, too different from us to truly understand. Rebecca visits me sometimes, not as a ghost, but as patterns in the water. The lake lets her consciousness rise to the surface when I'm alone on the shore. We can't speak in words, but I feel her presence. She's part of it now, but she's still my sister too. I won't live forever, and I wonder what will happen when I die. Will I join the others in the lake mind? Will I become like Dr. Corelli, a consciousness spread through water? Or will the bargain I made protect me somehow? There's one thing I'm certain of. Lake Superior is awake now, really awake. And it's watching us all through every drop of water we touch. So the next time you stand by a lake, or feel rain on your skin, or take a drink of water, remember my story. Remember that water remembers. Water watches. Water waits. And sometimes, water speaks. Retry Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.